after reaching the legendary transcendent fifth order status that very few entities have achieved. The god tree's golden body unleashed a resplendent light. But something made him pause upon inspecting his status window. Instead of a massive upgrade to his entire arsenal, the logic-defying breakthrough did not result in any changes to his abilities. Hold up, wait a minute. In the past, breaking through to the next level would give him a massive upgrade in innate talent or skills, but this time, the universe must be playing tricks on him. He started to panic. Thankfully, the system cleared up the misunderstanding. The host will choose the final evolution direction from the fifth order onwards. Godtree calmed down after reading that. His worries were replaced by curiosity. Following his steady growth and strength, there were many paths he could take and choices he could make. Choosing the Seed of Vitality route would make him the undisputed world tree. Absolute evolution would integrate his strength with nature itself. Thunder control could make him an immortal Thunderwood. Instantaneous would open the possibility of standing strong against the river of time. He can only choose one specialization from this point forward. His eyes darted towards the innate talent. He was reborn with the Seed of Vitality that offers endless life. Thunder control wasn't really the most suitable for him, and while instantaneous offered the overpowered ability of time control, it wasn't ideal for the current situation. He reckoned that absolute evolution was a double-edged sword, as he knew far too little about its intricacies. So Godtree chose to take the fifth order transcendence evolution route to become the world tree with the Seed of Vitality. This was the innate talent he was born with, so it's only fitting that he takes it all the way. He'd been building himself up for this path, the evolution of an undying tree. Of course, he felt terrible that he couldn't explore the alternative routes right now, but he could just unlock them with enough evolution points. Choosing the Seed of Vitality altered his race and genetic makeup to become the undying tree. He could basically regenerate from a single piece of broken branch. Finally, the overwhelming increase in spirit power that he was expecting came down from the cosmos, bathing his whole body with newfound strength. Overseas, the Black Flood Dragon had been making rounds of destruction all over the planet. The transcendent soldiers that the humans had couldn't even make a tiny dent in the dragon's scales. This beast had already destroyed 30 cities in succession. The 10 Nations Alliance suffered the most tremendous losses, but now the monster had set its sights on the Huachia Federation. The soldiers were conflicted. They knew it was impossible to be a dragon with their measly power, but retreating would essentially open human cities to annihilation. One soldier came up with a plan to somehow lead the dragon to the Misty Mountains, the territory of the mutant tree. They immediately geared up to do just that. They needed to rely on a monster to kill another monster. In the background, a cloaked figure was intently watching all the destruction and deaths. The Black Flood Dragon gladly followed the soldiers to the mutant tree's territory. He still harbored some serious resentment against that purple python that messed him up in the sea. He thought that the Void Snake was one of Godtree's soldiers. Standing around the perimeter of the said mountain was the entire force of the Godtree faction. The silhouette of the Black Flood Dragon entering their home swiftly came into view. White Tiger still had his speech impediment, saying, "Everyone will die." Ninetails understood the gravity of the situation. Something powerful and hostile had just entered their territory. The master was still cultivating, so it was up to the subordinates to fight. Who would have thought that the one who would step up to the plate would be the Emperor Alligator? He proudly stepped forward and swore to lock down this region on behalf of his boss. After years of fending off threats away from the Misty Mountain, they could finally see how much this beast of a reptile had progressed. The Black Flood Dragon immediately showed why he was an enemy that could not be taken lightly, but blasting a dragon breath that cleared the thick mist away from his path. When he decided to push forward in the clear skies, he was greeted by an intense predatory glare. The Emperor Alligator and the Black Flood Dragon stood in front of each other, not letting themselves get intimidated by one another. The Emperor spoke in a low tone. He declared that this was where the dragon would stop. Advancing deeper into the mountains would not be allowed. The Black Dragon remembered this scaly beast. 3 years ago, the Emperor killed the Sea Tribe's prophet. Finally, this bad blood could be settled. Both parties already knew that this confrontation would lead to a fight. One way or another, the Black Flood Dragon, with his superior speed, started the fight by restricting the Emperor's movements with a coil construction once held in place. The dragon began amassing a terrifying amount of spirit power in his dragon's breath. The Emperor wouldn't get one shot at it like that, though he transformed into his rock dragon mode, breaking free from the constriction. As his body increased in temperature, he grabbed the dragon's body with enough grip strength that it looked like he was about to tear it apart. Since the intruder kept on flexing with his dragon's breath, the Emperor decided to do the same. And so, the two draconic beasts were locked in a stalemate, while they were priming destructive attacks to throw at each other at point-blank range. When they unleashed it at the same time, destruction ensued. Everything within the vicinity must have melted out of existence. The explosion, as big and destructive as it was, did not even put a dent in the Emperor's rock dragon mode. But the Black Flood Dragon did not suffer any injury, either. It was a draw. What the dragon did next to break this tie was brutal. He chomped down on the Emperor's nape, like it was bloody lunchtime. He was starting to realize that, aside from the mutant tree, this mountain was filled with formidable beasts in the fourth order of transcendence that could not be taken lightly. While grating his teeth through the painful bite wound on his nape, the Emperor focused his power on his sharp claws. His revenge came quickly. A massive gash was painted on the black dragon's body, blood spurting out in excess. Infuriated, the black dragon used his go to move the white dragon's breath. This time the alligator was prepared, and he got his defenses up in time to take the hit. Without any problems, he managed to stand tall against such a destructive technique. Who wouldn't be hyped if they did that? If you looked at it from afar, the eye test would suggest that the black dragon held a definitive advantage in size and genetics, but even Ninetales was surprised that her brother was actually going toe-to-toe with a mythical beast. If the two monsters kept at it, they might go on fighting for a long time without a winner. Moreover, the Emperor had the added duty of naming his surroundings, so as not to interrupt Godtree's cultivation. Ninetales reckoned she would have to take action herself at this point. Just when she was about to join the fray, a still voice advised her to just absorb the spirit power in the mountains peacefully. At this point, the dragon fight had devolved into a painful, screeching match as both beasts tried their best to one-up their opponent in any way possible. The Emperor was one hard-headed entity. Unless the Black Flood Dragon somehow managed to kill him, he wouldn't let any hostile enemy pass. Also, he couldn't stand talkative fools like the Black Dragon, who kept on yapping and yapping. In the middle of a fight, the two dragons were about to engage in the climax of their fight when Godtree's root sprouted in the middle of the battlefield. The root turned to the Emperor Alligator, and Yu advised that his general should go back and cultivate with the others. He would take care of the annoying intruder. The Black Flood Dragon perked up the sight of his primary mission, making himself known. That excitement was immediately extinguished after getting hit by a void beam right to the face. Godtree could not let this mockery of his territory go on. Whether he liked it or not, this driving would follow him to another location. That void beam did not only hurt, but it was a special attack that could break the fabric of reality and open another dimension. Yuzi's root followed the dragon's battered body right into the crack in space. With that, it seemed as though peace had been restored in the Misty Mountain as everyone got back to focusing on breaking through their limits together. Inside the crack dimension was nothingness that stretched out infinitely. The Void Realm, seeing the Void Root transforming into its void snake form, the Black Dragon was taken aback for a second. It only occurred to him now that the void snake that humiliated him before was just one of Godtree's limbs. No wonder there were so many similarities. You see, he started interrogating the beast and asking if darkness had already awakened. The Black Dragon felt insulted that he was even under interrogation. He came here to fight. Losing his chance to evolve into a true dragon was a stain that he wouldn't be able to wash off. That's why the hatred he had for Godtree was immeasurable. Without saying another word, the dragon's entire body lit up with a mysterious power. This fool was going 100 red off the bat, and burning his own soul for more power. His heart was filled with so much hate that he was willing to pay the ultimate price just to get a shot at killing Godtree. The Black Dragon was a realistic thinker. He knew that to bring down a god, you must bring him and yourself together back into the endless karmic flame. But the Godtree Void Snake was not fazed at all. He just apologized and refused to join the dragon in this suicide mission. The power of a dragon burning up his own soul to unlock untold potential was actually starting to shatter the Void Realm. To make matters worse, the dragon started priming his signature move. Only this time, it was 3 spheres of pure power instead of just 1. Yuzui was not dumb. He wasn't going to let his opponent get a powerful attack off while he twiddled his thumbs. He brought down the wrath of a deity in the form of a claw, pinning down the beast's body into the void. The mythical monster was finally getting a taste of the all-encompassing void. A weapon so powerful it seemed impossible. Void Snake looked the dragon directly in the eye. This powerless ant, that's parading in the skin of a mythical beast, wanted to kill him in a one-on-one fight. The gap in their power was so vast that even the dragon himself failed to see where he stood on the scale. Coiling his body around the beast, you see, you wanted to impart some words to be passed on to darkness. Looking at the dragon's ugly face, he immediately changed his mind. Instead of releasing the beast back with a message, this mythical monster could just become another commodity for his evolution. The dragon laughed like a madman, even after being beaten horrendously. The beast still had faith that his king, the darkness, would trample over God Tree one day. Tired of all the nonsense that this worm was spouting, Yu tightened his coil and crushed the flesh and bone in the dragon's body. You're a victim. It was like squeezing fresh orange juice in the morning. It's perfect if you happen to like drinking dragon blood for breakfast with the enemy dealt with. Yu called out for his soul soldier, residing in the void realm, Leon the Mantis. As soon as he made the call, a sharp aura came, darting through the emptiness at ridiculous speeds. Leon had undergone quite a transformation after staying in this realm. His body had adapted to the harshness of the void, making him an efficient hunting and killing machine. To date, he was getting quite an impressive treat. The entire body of a black flood dragon to feast on. It would undoubtedly be a great help to him. Leon did not waste a single second and started munching on his hearty meal. Godtree watched from the sidelines. Leon's last breakthrough was thanks to the 9-colored spirit power during the tide, reaching the third order within this void Yuhi. He could finally feel the breath of other living creatures besides the Leon. There were definitely other void races lurking around this endless space. The mantis just finished his meal, and a dramatic increase in power coursing through his body almost tore him apart. There was no doubt about it. Zillion was evolving. Evolution through the process of devouring flesh is a ferocious way to grow stronger. That's what the void does to living beings. After eating the freshly killed corpse of a mythical being, Zillion absorbs some of the dragon's natural gifts, stemming from a superior bloodline. The void is like a separate universe, nurturing different kinds of creatures. Maybe Godtree can explore and subdue a few more void creatures similar to Zillion. If he continues to grow stronger, he'll eventually run into them. Speaking of Zillion, the humble mantis that just wanted strength had his genetics shifted, now belonging to the Void King tribe. His innate talent plays a huge part in his adaptation. He has Void Claw's hunting instinct, the breath of the sea, the rhythm of the void, stealth, and now dragon skills. After snacking on an entire dragon, the mantis' body has grown to more than 2 meters, just about the same height as Qingdong. He used to be a tiny mantis, nurtured initially to be an assassin, but he might be too massive for that role now. But that won't be a problem. Based on the aura he was emitting, his killing potential wasn't diminished at all. In fact, he's even more horrifying now. That's only natural, as the Void tribe can be considered one of the most powerful races. Now that the blood and flesh have been bestowed upon Leon, it's time to figure out what to do with the rest of the dragon's remains. Of course, Yuji can afford to waste a dragon's soul, so he promptly took out the essence of the beast in the form of a white sphere. Holding it in his hands, it's unbelievable that the life of such a powerful being could be reduced to something so tiny. Godtree exited the void realm and began looking for Xiaoling, who was cultivating in one of his winding branches. As soon as she heard her master's voice, Xiaoling paused her cultivation. He intends to give her the high-quality soul sphere of the Black Flood Dragon. Although part of it was destroyed in combat, it should still be considered a priceless treasure. This was perfect. A sphere that contains the soul of a mythical beast would be the most fitting catalyst for her to break through to the fourth order, defying all odds. She now has 2 beast spirits residing inside her body. One was the centipede she's been nurturing for years, and the other was the unruly dragon. Overall, the fight in the Void Realm yielded some decent returns. It essentially bolstered their forces by helping Leon and Xiaoling reach the fourth order. Xiaoling breakthrough among the crowd. Some beasts even paused their own cultivation to watch the spectacle. The centipede and dragon soul dance all around her body, letting themselves be absorbed. They ultimately coalesced around her, boiling and winding in a bright white and purple light. The centipede manifested into a purple earring that attached itself to her left ear. The same goes for the black dragon, which took the form of a black earring and equipped itself on her right ear. It was a massive success. Xiaoling could probably contend for the title of the strongest human right about now. The first one she saw upon opening her eyes was her generous master, already expecting her successful evolution. Xiaoling smiled with joy. The power she now possesses is immense. While Godfrey was busy praising one of his generals, a spirit power spike could be felt in the distance. It looks like White Tiger wanted some attention for himself. Shoo, as he began warring, as his power level shot up drastically. Opening his wings, the overgrown cat dramatically made his breakthrough in the air for everyone to see. It's a well-deserved evolution. He's been working hard with Thorm and Shaolin, and managing a safe for the past 3 years. But so is everyone else, and they are reaping the benefits of their hard work simultaneously. Shingang, Tyrannosaurus Glacier, Demon Cow, and the rest of the gang were pushing themselves to the limit, enriching their bodies with the spirit tide. They say that when it rains, it pours. That's definitely what's happening right now. Godfrey has been waiting for this day for a very long time, the day when everyone gets strong enough to stand with him at the peak. The cosmos gave its blessing, and the enemies of the Misty Mountain better be prepared for what's to come. Speaking of enemies, let's see what's up with the beast-riddled continent of Australia. They're what's left of the Australian humans are fighting hard, but they are essentially fighting a losing battle. They might get a kill or two out of desperation, but the sheer number of beasts and their superior strength might just be too much to survive. A lone soldier, who's been fighting against a beast attack for who knows how long, is starting to run out of steam in this world and era. Australia is made up of 14 sovereign countries, all of them suffering from different degrees of ambush. Out of every continent in the world, they have the highest scale of destruction and casualty count. Even the soldiers that the government deploy, their best of the best, were falling like flies. Everyone is dead, leaving only a few stragglers to mourn for their lost comrades. They managed to protect one city, but almost everyone died in doing so. The team leader half-heartedly advised his troops to wipe their tears, as they successfully did what they set out to do, protect the city. Those who sacrificed their lives for the mission to succeed did not die in vain. That's their consolation prize. That's the sentiment that they must repeat in their minds to go on, now that they successfully defended the city. What's next? They should go home with their family safely, right? Ain't nobody got time for that. Well, how about bursting into nothingness? Vaporized by nuclear levels of biohazardous substance. The team leader watched as his remaining soldiers were wiped out of existence. He must not have realized that he's in a messed up coma. Who's the culprit, you asked? Well, we've seen one of them before. The world dubbed one of them the Destruction Beast. Australia all those years ago. The world was plunged into hopelessness when one of these bastards wreaked havoc, and now there are dozens of them coming out of the ground, as if they spawned from hell to cause mayhem. Their roars are shrill and grating. Their strength is devastating. I would really hate to be a human in this verse, bro. Back in the Misty Mountain, the simultaneous evolution continues. The spirit tide was working overtime to supply the beasts with enough spirit power to step into the next level. Standing out among the beasts was our favorite golden assassin Sparky, surrounded by his army of war-tested mutant ants. Surprisingly, Sparky has unlocked a heavenly emperor ant's bloodline slumbering inside him. This ultra-rare bloodline granted him unparalleled strength and a constantly evolving exoskeleton. You notice this unexpected royal bloodline evolution from afar aside from Sparky. The Queen Ant has also awakened, the Empress Ant bloodline. The Ant army just kept on surpassing their potential, one after another. But the threat of darkness is awakening is disconcerting from the Misty Mountain. Godfrey can sense the abnormal spirit powers spreading across Australia non-stop. There's no doubt that darkness is gearing up for a terrifying attack, and they only have a limited time before the spirit tide officially ends. Logically speaking, the enemy won't make a move during this period of free spirit power in the air. He reckons that the rapid recovery of the Black Flood Dragon should be Darkness's doing. This means that just like Godfrey, the embodiment of evil evolution is also recruiting companions at the moment. Staying that her master was deep in thought, Shilin asked him what he was thinking about. Concerned with the constantly growing force of darkness, Yu tasked Shilin to pressure her people to push and become stronger. That includes 3 other Federation cities and the Dark Council. Sensing the urgency in his voice, Shilin complied. The ultimate battle will start very soon. By all accounts, this will be the most dangerous battle that the Misty Mountains will ever have to face. Darlington see that the threat of darkness was weighing heavily on her master's mind. At this point, it's pretty clear that darkness has taken control of Australia somehow, and once the spirit tide ends, the fate of the world will be put on the line. It would not be unrealistic to say that the Misty Mountains will lose a lot of companions in this incoming war. No matter how strong Yu is, he's just one guy. He can't guarantee the protection of every subordinate in the war against darkness. Moreover, the final boss's power level is still a mystery, but he's positive that darkness will definitely not be below the 5th order of transcendence in terms of strength, so this time, he might need to step out of the conventional playbook and strike first. Isti Mountains has to take the initiative before the enemies have the chance to react and formulate a plan. A first attack that cannot be defended against, while everyone else was busting their asses, trying to absorb as much spirit power in the air as possible. The little panda was taking a peaceful nap. The only thing that could wake him up was his phone blaring with a specialized ringtone for that girl from Jia or City, wiping the sleepiness from his eyes. He picked up the call and asked Jia what was up in the other line. The lady was infuriated that little panda was so casual when something big happened. That put the balance of the entire planet in trouble. The destruction beast, Australith that almost flattened Gore City, has appeared once again. And there were a lot of them. Little panda's drowsiness vanished, replaced by urgency, thinking that Gore City was under attack again. Thankfully that was not the case. Jada's city was not under attack, because those destructive beasts had set their sights on the entire planet. Egypt was experiencing unprecedented decimation. They didn't even know how to deal with those seemingly immortal beasts. Brazil was not spared either. The Australoids crossed the oceans just to lay siege to their land. In Paris, the Eiffel Tower is about to be eaten. For some reason, all relevant human cities are under attack. It was at this moment that Yuji realized that darkness had already made its move, when he was just trying to come up with a plan to attack first. Freedom Federation is home to a lot of talented, transcendent humans, but their measly strength was useless. Against absolute power, victory is but a dream, so they quickly shifted their focus to at least buy enough time for the civilians to escape the horrible decimation. Even if they have to put their lives on the line, the transcendent humans intend to block the enemies, which was a foolish decision in hindsight. The Australith attacking the Freedom Federation just opened its mouth and unleashed a deadly beam of red energy. It tore through the city and vaporized any foolish hero who tried to stand in front. The civilians who were just trying to desperately run for their lives were deleted out of existence. Outside the city, peculiar traffic has jammed up. These humans have never learned their lesson, despite being under constant threat of being wiped out. A family of 3, mommy, daddy and a little girl, tried to drive away from the burning city. But all the Australith had to do was turn its head to the countless cars trying to flee and fire up another beam, deleting everything in sight with a scorching blast. The coordinated Australith attacks extended to the 10 Nations Alliance. In its religious capital, the false prophets continued peddling their promise that the believers were safe within the church, for evil cannot destroy their faith. Also, their beloved bishop, blessed by the gods, has gone to the battlefield to protect them. Due to the false prophet's impassioned speech, the believers clasped their hands in prayer with absolute faith that did not last long, as they started scrambling chaotically once the roof of the church was destroyed by an Australith tendril. When the crimson eyes of the beast looked down on them, like ants, their beliefs were dashed out. Mr. False Prophet actually believed that he had the protection of the great bishop, and that evil forces could not touch him. That earned him an obliterated head, courtesy of a special red beam, directly from the monster's maw. The believers scrambled in a panic, as they got picked off one by one. The astral lift was having a buffet of tasty, gullible people to strengthen itself with juicy human meat, and the beast enjoyed inflicting pain upon its prey, making sure that they got chewed up before being digested in just a few seconds. The Church of the Great Bishop became a wasteland of blood and gore. All the believers were dead and eaten. Me personally, I wouldn't take this level of disrespect. The Australith went on to get some more destruction and eating done. The United Nations, or what's left of them, was forced to hold an emergency meeting on how to deal with their imminent extinction. All eyes were on Australia and the abnormal rise of powerful spirit beasts coming from the continent. Almost every country in the world was under Australith invasion. The Australian representative was taking a lot of heat from other delegates for failing to detect the existence of these beasts. But he toughened his resolve and asked the other countries to provide support to his country instead. The humans in Australia were on the brink of extinction. At this point, the delegates singled out the Huaxia Federation's head, as this guy should understand the horrors of Australia more than anyone else. Australia didn't have a powerful beast as an ally, like the mutant tree, to rely on in a colossal crisis. Australians had to depend on themselves, and they were not nearly capable enough to resist. There was also the threat of Australis entering metamorphosis and laying eggs. The other delegates understood the situation, But there were 10 Australis at the fourth order of transcendence out on the loose, counting all of humanity. There were only 5 humans at the same level. Putting humanity in an all-out war against a stronger enemy would just be foolish. What they needed to do was ensure that humanity survived. When all was said and done, the Australian delegates snapped. Those destruction beasts ruined the world. Were intelligent, they wouldn't leave loose ends. While they still had an inkling of fighting power, humanity should work together, instead of protecting their own countries. It wasn't out of line in saying that once Australia falls, the rest of the world would probably follow. In Australia's country station, an unwanted guest just entered the premises by force. They have an law in their name. That's just asking for trouble. He killed the measly security team manning the whole establishment and the news anchor's life on air, like he was stepping on an insect. The crew didn't know what to do. Darkness had entered the broadcast station to send a message to the world. Darkness and his humanoid form turned to the mortified crew remaining and demanded that they help him go on air. If they dared to run, he threatened to just kill everyone in the city without batting an eye. What other choice did they even have? The chief of the station greenlit the broadcast. Every television in the world started broadcasting the words of Darkness addressing all of humanity. Even the internet was played with live streams of the proclamation. Humanity was glued to their screens, trying to make sense of the situation, while watching a humanoid creature speak. Word of such an event reached the United Nations meeting. World leaders and delegates were gathered in one room. They watched the live feed on Australia's T channel. The unnerving appearance of Darkness appeared on the large screen. His singular crimson eye and pale countenance sent a primitive jolt of fear into everyone's system. They had never seen anything like this before. Darkness started his speech off by properly introducing himself. He made it clear that he might look humanoid, but he wasn't human. The surviving humans had already felt the horrors of Australis running rampant in those major cities. He didn't give a damn if humans believed what he was about to say next, but he'd say it anyway. He confessed to being a mastermind behind the deployment of those fearsome destruction beasts. That little tidbit of info should be enough to give the viewers a complete understanding of just how much power he wielded. Well, this wasn't anything surprising. With that established, Darkness wanted to tell the people of the world a few more things. Those 10 Australis that he unleashed into the wild were just the tip of the iceberg. He still had another 50 stashed somewhere, ready to get sent out whenever he pleased. Hearing those words terrified the world leaders down to their core. The hopelessness of their situation was starting to sink in, but Darkness didn't stop there. Other than the 50 Australis, beasts that were 4th order and above, numbering more than 1,000, were waiting on standby. As for beasts in the 3rd order, he had countless of them itching for action. Moreover, Australopithecus were not even the most potent beast under him, but it should be more than enough to be considered extreme for humans. Why is he flexing so hard though? Chill. He proclaimed that very soon he would issue the slaughter of all the humans on this planet. But he was willing to give them one last chance. Humanity must follow his orders, and he considered leaving a piece of land where some of them could survive, preventing their extinction and continuing their lineage. As for what this chance was, or what kind of orders Darkness had for them, everyone was on pins and needles to find out. Darkness's tone shifted into a more serious one. He simply wanted humanity on his side, for a crusade against that hateful tree. Everyone knew what this order implied. They were being forced to choose a side in a war of gods. Darkness continued that if humanity helped him get rid of that mutant tree, they could continue living safely in their very own corner of the world. Thankfully, Little Panda had internet in the Misty Mountains, and they were able to watch the broadcast live. God Tree did not see this coming. Darkness was actually trying to put him in a position against humans. Ben. As if sensing his eyes glued on the tiny phone screen, Darkness started addressing Yuzi personally. He wanted to ask if God Tree still remembered what they said to each other previously. The last time they clashed for a short time, Yuzi vowed to defeat Darkness. With a twisted smile on his face, he admitted that these humans wouldn't be that useful to his cause, but he'd still take pleasure in watching them play around. Hearing these 6 sentiments out of the humanoid's mouth, everyone realized that Darkness saw the survival of humans as nothing more than just a game. Darkness continued addressing Yuzi personally, promising that they would be meeting each other very soon. At that time, he vowed to kill every single beast in the Misty Mountain, while forcing God Tree to watch. Bro is evil to the core. Now that he said what he wanted to say, Darkness wanted to leave humanity a little gift, just to prove that he was not lying. He would destroy the city he was standing in, just for the hell of it. The humanoid's body started heating up and glowing with a nuclear radiance, while the imploding energy leaked out. The first casualties were the T crew. who were crapping their pants from the start of the broadcast. Then the rest of the city followed. As darkness used his body as a nuclear bomb that destroyed everything in sight. The stream naturally cut off after that. The network building was deleted, along with the city and its inhabitants. After all, seeing the satellite feed of the city, darkness just blew up. It was confirmed that everything had turned to ashes in an instant among the burning rubble and debris of a destroyed city. Darkness emerged without a scratch. Isn't this just an average day in Australia? This dude could actually turn his body into a weapon of mass destruction and not suffer any drawback or cool down. How broken is that? After the literal nuclear explosion, the United Nations meeting fell into a chaotic uproar, with country representatives scrambling to establish a plan of action. One of the representatives made a stand to continue the conference where they left off, is see where everyone stood. One idea is already in the back of everyone's mind. They will have a vastly different conclusion and focus this time around, back in the Misty Mountains. Xiaoling was pondering that Teva stunned. Darkness obviously knows that humans don't stand a chance against God Tree. So why did he call them to action? Perhaps darkness just doesn't want Yuzu to be on the same side as humans. No matter how powerful he is, he was still defeated by humans in the past. Maybe that's why he's shifting humanity's target. Or maybe there's another secret reason. Today is the 10th day of the Spirit Tide eruption from the cosmos. It will inevitably end soon. Perhaps the biggest harvest this time around was the God Tree's 7 dimensions that have tirelessly absorbed spirit power. Each of them expanded to more than 10,000 square meters. During their expansion, the dimensions also obtain new abilities respectively. Now, God Tree can connect the 7 of them and transfer energy amongst themselves. Using the dimension of Earth, he constructed a vast, scorching continent within the dimension of fire. He used the dimension of light to condense a light source in the dimension of the Earth, while using the dimension of life to provide vitality. It has become the most habitable of all 7. As for the dimensions of thunder and ice, he did not bother making any drastic changes. These specialized ones can just be used by the beasts, with high affinity to their corresponding elements. Had already decided that the dimension of life will be his own main camp. The dimension of the void is inhabited by Z, Leon, and the mysterious lurking creatures currently. At this point he'll just have to leave the rest of time and expand the 7 dimensions as much as possible. He has to secure as much spirit power as the spirit tide would allow. Back in Australia their expanded spirit tide has grown a lot larger than before, due to the intervention of darkness. This opens an even bigger cultivation spot for everyone in the Australian beast army. The one overseeing this pivotal place was none other than the enhanced kangaroo beast. He noticed the purple-cloaked figure arriving and asked what was the matter. Purple Cloak was having some doubts about whether it was really right for them to follow this new Darkness King. To that guy they are nothing but handy weapons to be used and abused. For Kangaroo that does not matter at this point. This guy got jacked and became so power-hungry that he would take any maltreatment as long as he could get more power. He doesn't care who the king they're serving anymore. He would gladly join hands with their old enemies in the sea, tried an alley with those useless humans, just so he could get bigger slice of the power pie. Their goal is still the same after all. They just need to focus on the obstacles in front of them and destroy them without mercy. Purple Cloak looked at him with disbelief, realizing that this guy was not his friend anymore. Kangaroo did not like that at all. It was as if his comrade was looking through his soul. Purple Cloak just dismissed the matter altogether. But he knew that the kangaroo in the past would never say something so class and undignified. Kangaroo did not deny nor did he get offended. He knew that he had changed more than anyone else. The Darkness King stood at the forefront of the dimensional tier, letting out endless amounts of spirit energy. When he opened his mortifying crimson eyes, he proclaimed that the spirit tide would end in just another week. At that time it didn't matter what the outcome between humanity and the mutant tree trade was. The Australian coalition will only have one mission: eliminate everything. Until they are the only ones who remain standing. At the end the mindless beasts that blindly received power from the new king cheered on with their roars as the war inches closer. No one knows what's going on in the twisted mind of the Darkness King. Up in the majestic realm of the Celestial Mountain, the white jade elephant walked with a serious expression on his face. He was seeking an audience with some mysterious beings, standing on their pedestals to inform them of what was happening down on the surface. That darkness has awakened once again. That should be their signal to set off and prepare a few things for the upcoming war. In the ocean depths, Misty Mountains aquatic unit, which consisted of the Hydra and the killer whale, was also hard at work today. They were heading for a mysterious ancient gate situated in the middle of nowhere. Upon opening this ancient gate, they were greeted by a blinding glare of endless light. The killer whale tried his hardest to peer through the blinding gate and saw something that shocked him. I don't really know what it is, but it's bathed with a golden hue. Back in the United Nations meeting, some factions refused to cooperate with darkness, as it's unacceptable to throw their forces on the mutant tree when their projected losses would be 90 of the human population. From humanity's standpoint, no matter what they choose, they're screwed. The difference in their collective strength compared to God Tree or that darkness guy can't be explained with just numbers and data. The head of Huaxia Federation is very familiar with God Tree's feats, and the humanoid darkness's words and actions confused him. He can't quite wrap his finger around it, but something is not right with those threats. Impressively, this guy arrived at the possibility that darkness is threatened by the mere existence of humans on his own while he was deep in thought. The whole building started shaking vigorously. Since the bold proclamation of darkness, the United Nations Conference has gone on for 2 days and 2 nights without making a final decision. And today the building, full of national leaders, was subjected to another shocking incident. Yusuk himself has appeared at the United Nations Council in his sleek combat form, it looks like. The big guy has to step up and move things along for these indecisive bastards. Bro had an immaculate aura, for real. The whole floor of the council was filled with winding roots and branches establishing God Tree's control. This ugly conference room was due for renovation. Anyway, you might as well pattern it out of God's body. Seeing the unexpected arrival of one of the most powerful beings on the planet, everyone was at a loss for words. These nation leaders were defenseless. The entire political roster of the world could be wiped out any second. The Federation head was mortified, but for different reasons. He already thought that there was something more to Darkness's speech. Perhaps it was time to get some answers. Yu Yu's arrival was flashy and control. He demanded everyone's attention and fear by his mere presence. He started off by politely jabbing at their unexpected meeting in such a formal setting. As far as these incompetent leaders knew, the God Tree should not have moved from the Huaxia Federation. There was also a spirit power isolation system installed in the building, so they should have been alerted. Well, such things are totally useless against an absolute powerhouse like the God Tree. He simply picked apart the system casually on the way to this place. Every leader was trying not to crap their pants, thinking that the God Tree appeared to prevent humanity from joining hands with darkness by getting rid of them, but he dispelled all those thoughts by insulting the world leaders for their narrow-minded thinking. As always so, he wouldn't bother with niceties and get straight to the point with his agenda. He asserted that he was not going to play any tricks like the one Darkness tried to pull. With that being said, he promised that if humanity tried to go against him, every single human would be wiped out from this very planet. He gravely emphasized the point that he would not leave a single human alive for those who weren't convinced yet. Out of every leader in this conference hall, Yu Yu singled out the head of Huaxia, the one who probably understood him relatively well. Yu Yu honestly admitted that he wasn't clear why darkness was targeting humans yet, but there was one thing he could tell everyone for certain right now. In the previous era, darkness also descended upon the world. And at that time, humans were the ones who defeated darkness with their own hands. Hearing that wild fact was almost impossible to believe for the humble, powerless humans at the conference. Huaxia Federation's head steered the conversation back to business and asked Godtree what his real goal was in crashing the meeting. It couldn't have been just to tell them this unverifiable information. Yu Yu kept it plain and straightforward. He divulged his plan to start a war with darkness. Whatever humanity wanted to do from this point on would be entirely up to them. The Huaxia had wanted to know if God Tree was confident in winning a war against such an enigmatic opponent if the war proceeded. He answered back with a question of his own. If they couldn't envision a win, then do they not fight at all? Do they just lay back and let death and darkness prosper? You see, you could already said his piece. Humanity could join hands with the dark or stand by his side. It was time for the world leaders to put on their big boy pants, make the choice, and place their bet. After he left the leaders with a massive question that would determine their survival, an eerie silence filled the conference. Not a single one of these vocal politicians wanted to open their mouths for fear of saying the wrong thing. Back in the Misty Mountains, things had been going swimmingly. Now that the sight of humans had been appropriately handled, all that was left to do was wait for everyone to finish absorbing the remaining spirit power from the spirit tide. However, there was a problem with the Australian forces looming over Yuzu. Even if he were to charge overseas at full speed, it would take too much time. He needed to consider his next move properly. While he was mulling over the decisions that he had to make, he was instantly transported to a familiar empty space. He already knew what was happening. The system pulled him aside for some unknown reason, so he asked why the system had a habit of intervening when things got a little too serious. First, its disembodied voice commented on Yuzu's adequate preparation for the incoming war against darkness. Well, the system was the one that pushed him into this position in the first place while he was here. Yuzu wanted to ask a long-standing question that had been stuck in his mind, and that he hadn't gotten the chance to ask. If you were to lose this incoming battle, what would happen to the world? The system plainly explained that if there was an imbalance between spirit power and the undead energy, the land they were standing on would eventually become a dead planet. If that's the case, then was it possible that darkness was planning to kill all living creatures right from the start? Where the world becomes a dead planet, can darkness continue to exist without light? The system answered that darkness would survive, without a doubt. He would simply start searching for another new planet to feed on a long time ago. The planet Mars was destroyed because of darkness. Yusuke was surprised to hear that ancient knowledge. Enough of the hypothetical losing situation. What would happen if he won? The system was quick with its answer. If Yusuke pulled through, spirit power would disappear from the world, and he would turn back into a normal tree. What the fuck, doesn't that mean death? If he was going to die, no matter what the outcome would be, then what was the point of fighting in the first place? The system had already warned him before that you would lose everything in this journey. Perhaps this was what it meant. Suddenly the talkative message board was speechless. Infuriated and frustrated, Yuzu glared at the visage of the system and asked, who exactly was behind that board? The system did not shut his question down outrightly. It just promised that when the time came, the truth would come out. But that was just a non-answer. If he would get the truth when the time came, then when was the right time? Angry, clueless, and hungry for answers, Yuzu threatened the system to stop talking nonsense. He wasn't even sure if he would still be alive when that freaking time came. The system backpedaled a little bit and told Yuyo that there was a chance to find out what he wanted, but the window was brief. Frustrated by all this cryptic messaging, he started yelling and demanding to know what this chance was. The system simply could not tell him for an unknown reason, adding that everything would depend on Yuzu. If he was brought to this isolated space to hear a whole bunch of nothing, then why in the world was he even called here? In the first place, it just pissed him off even more. I would be too. The entity behind the system must be sick in the head. Right, Izzy's tantrum was cut short when he was transported back to the real world. The spirit tide was still raining down blessings, and his 7 dimensions were still expanding. That trip to the unknown dimension just muddied everything up in his mind, except for his bad ending. No matter what happened every time the system spoke, it spoke in riddles. It was a bastard move. Not gonna lie, but Yuji was not the type to give up so easily. Since the system refused to tell him anything substantial, he would just find the answer by himself. While the boss was fuming in the mountains, the Flame Empress had flown back to her territory to call a critical meeting with her army, made up entirely of genetic freaks. The Dark Council. Just look at the devious smile of her vampire butler and the glares of her human-beast hybrid soldiers. You already know they mean business. Now that everyone is here, they can finally discuss their plan of action for the upcoming war. Transited Donnie Sins, also known as Baldy Benson, the guy under the Misty Mountain contract, is also back, and he's stronger than ever. This time, he called on the soldiers of his very own sovereign state, requesting those in the Transcendent Third Order or above to join the upcoming battle. The rest of the noob scrubs in his battalion will be in charge of preparing and defending the city from unforeseen attacks. Looking at the unyielding eyes of his men, it seems like Baldy Benson has cultivated a lot of respect in his home-ground Gold Mast. And the Iron Knights have teamed up to form a coalition of an ultimate attack force. Gold Mast gave an impassioned speech about all the times they put their lives on the line to protect the greater good. In the coming days, they will be doing the exact same thing and risking their lives to protect humanity. It will be challenging, and many will undoubtedly die. But at least it's a joint operation this time around. These human soldiers are so committed to protecting their kind, and that's admirable. But let's be honest. They're just ants in the eyes of the actual players. There's also this new group wearing Templar armaments, led by a very intense dude wielding a great sword. They think that the battle this time is all for honor. Dude, humans are about to be extinct. What are you yapping about? On a nearby cliff, a formidable beast takes a dramatic pose, surveying the land. It was the black panda that arrived late in Jagra City, all those years ago. His focus might be on the wrong thing. The war is coming. And he's thinking about his little brother, the little panda. 4 days remain until the end of the spirit tide. The United Nations finally made up their mind and came together to fight against something. They chose to declare darkness as their enemy. In the 10 Nations Alliance, destruction and death had become commonplace. The Australites were still roaming the land, but one of the beasts has surprisingly perished. In an incredibly brutal manner. It has been turned into a disgusting donut. A single man stood up against a seemingly unbeatable beast that even the God Tree had a tough time against in the past. It came at the price of a whole lot of civilians and believers, but the Australith's reign of terror is finally over, at least for now. The great bishop was not a fraud after all. He's actually a decent fighter. He turned to his subordinate to get a casualty count. He already knew that it would not be low out. Of the 300 people the church deployed in hopes of vanquishing evil, only 8 people were left. That's an unprecedented death toll. Hearing the number of hundreds of thousands of people who died fulfilling his orders, the great bishop huddled down and ordered the assembly of even more men. Bro is psychotic for sure. A new battle is about to start, and he can't afford to get upstaged by beasts. He has a godly reputation to uphold. Below Freedom Federation Sky City, a familiar figure has been messing with metals. Engaged in his own training art. He managed to coat some kind of beast in a metallic prison, consisting of scraps from broken infrastructure all around the city Yuri. The master of magnetism has bounced back from his embarrassing loss in the open ocean, and managed to subdue one of the roaming Australites in his area. He owed this power up to the spirit tie, which raised his strength by a decent amount. If not for that boost, he would have been helpless against this beast too. In the epicenter of evil, also known as Australia, human settlements were pretty much wiped out of existence, burned down to ashes since darkness awakened. Australia's 14 countries have all faced varying degrees of destruction. They have been plunged into a state of absolute anarchy. It's fitting to label it as hell on earth. The current human death toll has already surpassed 3 million and is still counting. Dead bodies littered the streets. Those who have luckily survived had to unluckily try their hardest to evade getting eaten by the rampaging, hungry beasts. But the story always ends up with the monsters making dinner out of fleeing humans. Nearly all hope has been lost. Still, some million groups equipped with useless firearms are trying their hardest to resist the incoming beast tide, trying to rip them to shreds. Unfortunately, their fates always lead to being just another meal for ruthless monsters. Some resist until the end, letting go of their lives just to get another fire of heavy artillery, in hopes of doing some semblance of damage. Based on the latent destruction that explosive shells provide, it might seem that the resistance is making some dent in the enemy's numbers. They can eliminate some of the smaller and lower-level beasts. It relieves some pressure for everyone, at least as the armed forces number dwindles. The belly of the beasts gets fuller. At this point, they probably accepted the fact that death is imminent, so they might as well go out with guns blazing. They were so focused on the land beasts trying to encroach on human soil that they failed to notice the aerial beasts swooping down from the skies. The bird beasts let out a shrill screech as they started picking off snacks from the ground. Just like the beasts walking on 4 limbs, the birds that dominated the skies were brutal with their methods. These overgrown chickens like going straight for the head, biting down hard and tearing bodies in half. As the final line of defense, the tanks lined up near the city and pointed their high-caliber tank guns in the air. It worked. The birds were too busy snacking on human flesh, only to get blasted with some heavy artillery in the face. Overall, Australia has become a zone of death for small-time beasts and punny humans alike. The once prosperous state has been plunged into absolute mayhem. Some of the survivors were lucky enough to evacuate on time, hiding themselves in underground bunkers for safety. But the unnerving silence outside the evacuation area is slowly breaking everyone down mentally. They wonder if the beasts have been cleared or if they could safely step out. Little did they know they were asking the wrong questions. The reinforced bunker gate started thumping and flexing. Everyone turned their attention to the sound, hearing the worst possible scenario. The thick bunker gate was forced open with sheer force. It was like it was ripped out of the concrete it was securely attached to. No one dared to make a sound. The survivors chose this bunker for its airtight security. Who would have thought that a single intrusion would make it their inescapable grave? The beasts that found the hiding spot looked like they were up to no good, as if they hadn't eaten in a while. In another air raid shelter, the situation was a little better than in the previous bunker here. The survivors are on lockdown without any phone signal coming in, as the network towers in the city above were destroyed long ago. Food will run out soon. So they need a plan. There's a growing sentiment among the civilians that this predicament was also the incompetent government's fault for being useless in a crisis. Suddenly one of the evacuees happens to catch a signal to get some updates from the outside world, but he didn't like what he saw at all. Today it marks the 5th year of the Spirit Power Recovery era. Today was the day that a massive country was completely and utterly destroyed by beasts. There are only 13 remaining states in Australia, and that number can still go down at any moment. The entire continent has become a battlefield, with humans failing to defend themselves, time and time again. Rescue operations are out of the question. What remained of the military forces strongly urged the survivors to take defensive measures and prepare food reserves in any way they could. But those advisories are just meaningless, empty words in the end. The Australians were left with nothing but despair. Australians be like, and I've decided that I'd want to die. At that moment something big was happening. In one of the surviving Australian states, war-tested veterans have lined up to be deployed on the harshest mission they have ever been on. Once again, everyone has been fighting on the front lines non-stop for the past few days. Many have lost friends and loved ones. The commander of the task force himself had lost his son and daughter in the fight against the Australia. That's why those who are still trying to survive eat them. There are many cities where citizens have been trapped and are awaiting rescue from now on. All the missions will be one-way trips. Everyone has to be willing to give up their life for certain in the upcoming grueling missions. The forces answered affirmatively in unison. It may not be the strongest force out there, but they certainly have the passion to save those who need it. Attack helicopters were loaded with the military forces and immediately departed for their drop zone. Back in the misty mountains, the spirit tide, crack in the space, was starting to wind down with the spirit power rain. It slowly shrunk in place until the radiant crack in space was barely visible at all. Guide Tree watch as the bountiful gift of the spirit tide got thinner, in real time by his estimates. There's only one day left until it officially closes. The closing of the tide will be the global call to the final war. And now that war is coming, it's time for Yu-Gi-Oh to uproot his main body and make some moves back in Australia. Another bunker is under threat from beasts that have found their way to the shelter's doorstep. Based on smell, they trust that the gate is sturdy enough to protect them, so all they have to do is stay put, and the beasts won't be able to penetrate. But the hippo beasts looked extra hungry and ferocious today. The sounds of their heavy footsteps filled the bunker with uneasiness and fear. They wanted to believe that the reinforced gate would hold up, but that belief is starting to get thinner now. Then the thing that they feared the most happened. The security gates that were supposed to keep them from harm's way started shattering under extreme pressure. Some evacuees had a bigger resolve to live than others. They had kids in their man. And if you were a kid in an underground shelter that's about to get infiltrated by hungry hippos, would you freak out too? Using their entire body weight, these beasts were determined to bash through that pesky hard door and get to the meat inside. Seeing that the gate was about to give in, some survivors finally gave the call to get the hell out and quickly make their escape through the other gate. That turned out to be the only move, as the gate finally collapsed under the hippos ramming, letting in several hippo beasts to go crazy. They didn't care where they stood. They would nonchalantly shatter a man's skull if it meant they could get to the copious amounts of human meat. After entering the security bunker, the carnage immediately commenced. Blood and gore filled the room as the hippos conducted an all-you-can-eat buffet. Those who escaped the initial feast ran for their lives, pushing each other in a panic, eager to reach the other gate. A father carrying his daughter had a grim expression on his face. He couldn't let his little girl die in a place like this, eaten by beasts like those. But the hopeless situation continued. They couldn't catch a prey. Some sharp-fanged beasts were waiting on the other side. The prey thought they were running for safety, but they were running straight to the predator's jaws. Instead, congratulations. You played yourself seeing the beast. At the only exit remaining, the inkling of hope that the survivors tried to hold on to was extinguished. Those at the front desperately tried to run back, but the hallway was too congested with other people. The people running away and the people running in were now stuck together. Everyone was going to die while being trapped in a miserable, crowded hallway. Vicious beasts had flanked both the front and the back. It was a hopeless situation with no wiggle room at all. Those on either side of the congestion perished while screaming in fear. The father carrying his daughter tried to shield the little girl from the horrific vibe and sound. It didn't matter if he died. He just wanted his child to survive. Everyone's prayers were answered by the sound of high-caliber weapons being fired from a distance. These Piercing bullets lodged themselves deep into the bodies of the sharp-fanged beast, pushing them away from the exit. A single file of heavily armed soldiers pushed through, desperately trying to make an escape path for the remaining survivors once the exit was secured. The commanding officer coordinated the smooth exit of the civilians. They had to be quick and organized. The people exited the underground facility, and what greeted them on the surface was destruction. Debris and fire replaced the infrastructure. Without waiting for the other soldiers to get out of the hell hole, the officer threw his explosive kit down the stairs. Without hesitation, they had to sacrifice brave soldiers just to avoid any more beast problems down the line. They had to be swift and decisive. After all, in the air, a rescue plane was already preparing to land and scoop up the eager survivors. Seeing that plane must have been like seeing God in the flesh. One moment they were on the brink of being brutally eaten by beasts, the next they were about to take to the skies. The military officers coordinated the boarding of the plane, trying to cram in as many people as possible. However, less than half of the civilians were allowed to board. The aircraft had already reached its limit, and taking any more people wouldn't have been possible, or they would have risked crashing the plane. The people panicked and demanded to know just when the next plane would come to rescue the rest of them. The officer didn't mince words and just apologize that this plane would be the last one. Once it takes off, the military will drop spirit fire bombs in the area to delay the beasts from attacking other cities. He gave it to them straight up. The people who are unable to board the last plane are going to die here, plain and simple. The survivors went from a hopeless situation to regaining that hope, only for their hearts to get crushed once again. Children were going to die. Thankfully, the father and daughter from the bunker were two of the few lucky ones who boarded the plane. The father had already lost his wife to the chaos. He couldn't lose his little girl too. But when he looked at those who weren't so lucky to board, he saw a mother carrying an infant, her tears of desperation visible even from afar. He tried to avert his gaze, just focusing on his own child. Then an old man, who could have just coasted to safety, stood up and proclaimed that he wouldn't leave, giving up his ticket to stay alive. He wanted to give his spot and this chance in life for that baby. Instead, the old man insisted that he had already lived for a long time. An infant was more qualified for a chance to board the plane to safety. Instead, pressed to pay respects to the OM. Even though that baby looks like a grown-ass man. That brief display of what humanity is all about lit a fire in the survivors' hearts. One by one, the adults who had secured a seat to safety stood up and gave up their ticket to a new life for those they thought deserved it. More able-bodied adults started exiting the plane and going back down to the battlegrounds grounds, knowing full well they die when the spirit fire bombs descended. They were willing to give up their lives for complete strangers, for kids who would usher in the new generation of humanity. The officer yelled at the crowd to stop dawdling and quickly board the plane. They didn't have much time before the ground got nuked. An incoming beast tide must have sensed that the survivors were trying to escape their grasp and kicked into gear for the chase. The soldiers and their guns were having a rough time holding the beasts back. The plane needed to leave. The kid, who had clearly suffered a lot in the destruction of the city, came up the line hoping to get a seat on the plane. The father, carrying his daughter, looked at the little boy and his heart couldn't help but ache. He looked at the kid, who was about the same age as his little girl, and felt the guilt of being given a seat on the plane. The boy did not speak. He just stared at the man with horrified eyes. Unable to bear it any longer, the man gently put his daughter down and looked her straight in the eyes. He reminded her to take care of herself and grow up. Well, the father knew that it would not be possible, but he promised to find her a bit later. Before the plane closed its doors to depart, the father gave up his seat, opening one more spot for the little boy below. When the plane door closed up, the reality of their current situation kicked in. They were about to die. They might die from the incoming beast tide, or they might die from the human spirit firebombs. Either way, they would die. And they collectively made their peace with however long they had left. But there were a few who started regretting trying to be heroes, regretting giving up their spot, when they knew full well that they were terrified of death. The father looked up at the departing plane. He knew that his promise to his little girl wouldn't be fulfilled from now on, and she must protect herself adequately. As the plane lifted off, the survivors who were left for dead looked at its retreating silhouette with complex emotions. Then the plane fucking exploded into pieces in midair, killing everyone on board, including the children who had taken the seats of the adults below. Why, you ask? Because none of us deserve nice things. And humanity will always suffer, especially in this story. The survivors below could not believe their eyes. How surreal was it that the path to freedom they expected was actually a vehicle to a brutal death? There was a creature up in the air, the one responsible for destroying the departing plane, full of innocent civilians. Dad looked at the skies. His brain must have blacked out at this point. His eyes were empty. Sorrow, grief and rage filled his body. Then at their rear, thumping sounds could be heard as the beast tide closed in. Most of the deployed military forces have fallen, eaten by merciless creatures. The remaining soldiers with guns slowly backed away, trying to ensure just a few more seconds of buffer before the beasts could reach the civilians. Their bullets might have worked against small-time beasts, but medium-sized monsters were immune to damage from armor-piercing rounds. When the enemies closed in, the few remaining soldiers did not stand a chance at all. Guttural roars filled the air as yet another round of running for their lives commenced. Dad hurriedly grabbed some metal pipes from the debris on the streets. He jumped towards the nearest beast with murder in his eyes and stabbed the furry monster in the eye, spurting blood and blinding the monster. He was already dead inside anyway, so he might as well take some enemies down with him while he was at it. Even the act of stabbing a monster in the eye wasn't nearly enough to erase the pain of losing his daughter in the cursed plane. He screamed and cried he wanted his little girl back. But his rage was reciprocated with a claw slash, sending him flying in the air. Dad dropped on the ruined pavement, puffing up blood as he bled eternally. Then one of the real heavy hitters made its entrance, and another Australia jumped into action with the beast tide and a few more reinforcements to wipe out powerless civilians. It wasn't enough to just call it overkill. At that moment, the Spirit firebomb deployment commenced. The plane might have failed, but they still needed to delay the beast march. The firebombs did precisely what their name suggested. They blanketed the ruined city with even more destruction and scorching flames. Dad knew he was probably going to die right there and then, but he was unwilling to go down like this. He wanted revenge if he couldn't do it himself. Then he asked the heavens for someone to do it in his stead. Anyone would do. He just wanted his little girl to get the justice she deserved. And the heavens answered his pleas when an unexpected guest made their entrance by socking one of the marching beasts in the face. The punch sent the monster rolling on the dirt, shocking the rest of the gang. This guest wasn't originally from Australia. He had massive angelic white wings. He had a fierce and sharp set of fangs, capable of tearing through anything. He had some beef with Australis for hassling his boss. A few years ago it was none other than White Tiger. The Misty Mountain forces had finally made their move. The war had officially begun, and they're bringing it to the enemy's home court. Now that the Misty Mountain gang has arrived in Australia, war has officially begun. White Tiger opens with his bloody roar to intimidate the small fries. But Australia's beast tide is not a pushover ragtag group of monsters. They have been converted and nurtured as loyal soldiers of darkness in the past few days. If an intimidating roar does not work, then why not try a goddamn hyper beam to mow them down? White Tiger's attack covers a massive, conical area of destruction that vaporizes most of the weaker beasts. But he might have underestimated their intellect a little as one sneaky canine beast managed to sneak to his right, aiming for the neck with its terrifying teeth. Fortunately, White Tiger is an absolute master of close combat. He clocks that canine beast before it can even take a nibble of his neck. He better not forget that there is one Australith in the mix too. This one likes using tentacles as his primary weapon. Those tentacles were heading directly for the oversized white kitty cat. If even one of these landed, it would be a massive problem. Fortunately, he did not crash this beast high party alone. There is also the little panda coming in, literally hot with a blazing fist. That fist landed devastatingly hard on the Australic's face, burning it up like it was hit with a descending mirror. The sheer force behind the punch was enough to knock the destruction beast out of balance, making it falter and fall on its back. Against the ruined city, little panda is fired up. He made a promise to himself that he wouldn't lose to another one of these bastards after he confronted one and lost a few years ago back in JR City. So the main force of this initial clash would be the dumbass duel. Little Panda and White Tiger. Sure, they're not the brightest, but they are supremely reliable in fights. Up front was the cacophony of Australian beasts, primates, birds, marsupials, and insects. They had all kinds of freaks juiced up, thanks to the arrival of darkness. This would be the second wave of the beast tide. Little Panda was getting a little worried, as there weren't supposed to be this many enemies. They must have been attracted by the scent of human blood. Fortunately, the beast tide is not the only one gang. The reinforcement treatment, the stable space nearby, started cracking into pieces. When a dimensional rift was successfully created, the rest of the Misty Mountains force started pouring out and stepping into foreign soil. Now that they had made their grand entrance, most senior general, the big sis of all nine tails, turned her ferocity on and ordered their army to kill every enemy in sight. This plan was formed a whole 2 days before, in the Misty Mountains, before the spirit tide officially closed and stopped, giving everyone that juicy free power up Tuska a tree. Since the inevitable end of that seemingly endless drip of spiritual power coming, they only had a few hours left to make the most of it. He proclaimed that the second the tide ended, they would head straight to Australia. This will be the third full-scale war since the one between Australopiths and humans. A significant difference this time is the opponent would be infinitely more powerful. The stakes could not be higher as well. If they mess up and lose this war, Misty Mountain, along with every living being on this planet, will cease to exist, but regardless of the consequences, they must win this war no matter what. After Gautrey's impassioned speech, all his generals, absolute beasts that look up to and revere him, wore their hearts out in response. Now they can't really take the plane to get into a foreign land. They don't have passports, and I'm pretty sure no airline would take them, so Godtree will open its dimensions, and everyone will enter, according to their corresponding element. From there, he will bring everyone and travel through the void to rush to Australia in the shortest time possible. Yuju opened his portals, each one had a vibrant color, according to the abundance of their respective elemental affinity. Back to the present, Australia is starting to look more and more like a ruined land, filled with nothing but bleak fire and dust of destruction. It only took the Misty Mountain force a few minutes to deal with the enemies at hand. With the heavy hitters entering the fray, the beast tide did not stand a chance at all, even if they had an Australopith on their corner. King Kong surveyed the area for information and happened upon a guy clutching a metal stick in his hands, hunched over against the debris. It was the ordinary dad who went berserk. After seeing the plane his little daughter boarded explode in the air, Shingen confirmed his death. He must have perished from the loss of blood after sustaining multiple wounds trying to fight the beast hordes. In the chat for the good dad, Nine Tails made the call to move to the next coordinate they had planned now that this city had been cleared. Before they moved on, they saw multiple dimensional rifts opening up from the skies, and good trees, roots slowly emerging from within every single one. Yushui was not going to let this beast tide go to waste, so he was taking everything, breathing or not, into his dimensions for evolution points. In the middle of the sky, you can see his main body watching everything from the most enormous dimensional rift. He was silently praising his subordinates for defeating a beast tide, pulled by a full-powered Australopith by themselves. Their growth in his absence was outstanding. In the Huixia Federation, officials panicked after receiving reports that the mutant tree had disappeared. Along with a thick mist, they sent a team to investigate, and found not a single powerful beast in the area. The head of state remained calm. You might have a few ideas as to where that enigmatic mutant tree has gone in the Freedom Federation. They were receiving reports of a powerful group of spirit monsters descending on Australian soil. The statesman immediately went to the worst possible scenario, thinking that darkness had summoned yet another group of powerful beasts. Then Huangjia relayed the information regarding Misty Mountain, and things finally started making sense. Our statesmen can't take this pressure. If a force of Misty Mountain had reached Australia, how would they have even done it in such a short time frame, without being detected by anyone? Is the mutant tree so mighty that he can transcend logic and the laws of physics? Deep in the camp of darkness, a familiar set of winding roots has stepped foot behind enemy lines. Inside the body of the king of the continent, darkness excitedly welcomes his fated rival. Those winding roots belong to none other than our boy Yuzu in his convenient demi-combat form. He made a specialized portal just to have a face-to-face with the big, bad boss, the inner circle of Australia's beast force. Maintain their calm and practice restraint. Kangaroo in the purple hood just observed, willingly sneaking behind enemy lines by breaking through the void as a bowler move. This is the extent of Godtree's powers. Yuyo turned to darkness. He taunted that with an ugly-ass one-eyed appearance. It's plain to see that darkness has absorbed the king of Australia. Darkness did not fall for the taunting though. He knew that our boy was trying to get him on an edge, so he clapped back by saying that Godtree should have just hidden himself, instead of showing up unprepared. Well, you see, you just snuck in here early to give a little warning and formally declare war. He promised to come and fight for real very soon, but before that he wants the massacres to stop. Darkness did not like his tone at all. If there's anything this maniac hates the most, it's being ordered around. Godtree did not hold back. He wanted to see who had the bigger balls. Between the two of them, he advised that Darkness should properly enjoy the little bit of time he has left. Before everything comes crashing down, personally I wouldn't take this level of disrespect. God Tree stood on a stone platform, facing darkness and the entirety of its forces alone. The final boss is tired of all these mind games and mystifying tactics. He wants war and death. He sent one of his green tendrils towards the intertwined roots, carrying God Tree's will, and destroyed it in one fell swoop. The physical form might have been torn apart, but the message was compelling. Kangaroo, as stupid as he is, thought that God Tree was done for just like that the monster they had been gearing up for so intensely had died, thankfully. Darkness has some common sense and knows that Yuzug just sent a clone to taunt and mess with their heads before the final fight starts. Back in the separate dimension, God Tree opened his eyes. He was sharper than ever before. He ordered his forces to head back to his dimensional rifts as they were about to take off the final battle back in Misty Mountain. The earth and spikes were still there, poking through the sea of trees, but the mist that made it so fearsome was gone. Human soldiers have stepped foot on the Forbidden Land for the first time in a long time. They were armed to the teeth, prepared for anything that could jump at them. But what they saw in the once forbidden land was even more bone-chilling than seeing your typical aggressive beasts. They immediately radioed over to headquarters to say that they had reached the location. The target has been confirmed to have disappeared. What they left was just a massive and unfathomably deep sinkhole in the middle of the woods. From above, the depth of the hole can't even be estimated. It was as if a whole underground city had been gouged out. The head of the Huaxia Federation was already expecting something like this to happen, so it wasn't too surprising. Still, there are way too many questions to be asked, and not enough answers to gather in. The Freedom Federation, the statesman, has just received confirmation from the earlier reports. They still can't explain how Misty Mountain reached Australia, though moving a tremendous amount of force to a different continent in just a few short days is unbelievable. Just how powerful is this mutant tree? Really, if it's him. Maybe they can have the chance to beat the odds and vanquish the embodiment of darkness itself. Still, humanity needs to contribute. So the statesmen asked for an update on their military preparations. This time every country on the planet had gathered, all transcended humans. The army, Navy and Air Force are on standby, just waiting for the go signal to move out soon. If they lose, it's all over for humanity. It's all over for history in the world. They must win on one of the many carrier ships. A belligerent voice was complaining about sitting on a toy boat for far too long. Just to reach the action, Big Panda demanded to know how long it would take for them to touch shore. And the poor knight had to answer that it would take them 5 days, and that's already considered fast. Big Panda can't wait that long. He will swim over so they can at least have some eyes on what's happening on land. He just can't wait to meet the one called Black Ball. The knight corrected Big Panda, the team leader, that the enemy is called Darkness, not Black Ball on the other side of the ship. Goldmask looked at humanity's forces in awe. The Navid is on standby, just waiting for the army. Every transcendent has also gathered. The last time Australia came, most of Huaxia's forces were at the Sakura Kingdom. This time they need to show the world who's boss. A veteran transcendent commented that in his long career it was his first time seeing such a large-scale gathering of military might. It is truly awe-inspiring. But even with this amount of force and troops, some were skeptical about if they could last a week. A week might even be optimistic. It would be considered a miracle if they could even last a day in combat. But even if that's the case, they still need to organize an effective, preemptive attack. Everyone on board already accepted the fact that they are most likely exchanging their lives for the next generation's peace. While the soldiers were discussing their mortality, a commotion erupted in the middle of the ship. Huaxia Federation's head of state made an appearance, his expression more intense than ever. Even Big Panda had to behave, seeing that the boss was here, but the knight still reminded his team leader to watch his words. The head of state told them to be at ease, as he just wanted to say a few words to the soldiers before heading to war. He stepped onto a makeshift podium, so everyone could see and hear him. The soldiers were visibly shaken by the prospect of heading to a land filled with bloodthirsty, superpowered beasts waiting to have them for lunch. The head of state made that fear even more real by saying what could happen without sugarcoating it in this war. There's a high possibility of losing their lives and crashing out. This combat mission is the first calamity of its degree that humans will be facing all of history. All 14 states of Australia have been decimated. The enemy is an entity that could make something like destroying a continent in a few days happen. Fellow humans with families and friends died in that land. They have gone through enough suffering. They cannot allow their fellow brothers and sisters to continue living in fear. Humanity's history hinges on this battle. If they lose, everything will come to an end. There will be no Huaxia, there will be no Earth. There will be no humanity. That's why even if they only have one living warrior, with Huaxia blood still standing, the head of state implores them to fight, till the bitter end. They need to do so not just for themselves, but for the future that's waiting for peace. And so he just had one more word to say, that everyone must keep in their minds throughout the whole war: kill. The soldiers and Transcendent chanted that word, until the air was filled with intense bloodthirst and determination. Someone cooked here with the impassioned speech. But Big Panda bade his farewell as he swam for Australia. Upon hitting the water, the big guy did not stop paddling, just to reach the battlefield as fast as he could. The third spirit tide lasted for 1 month. The spirit cracks have closed up. Now the war for the planet begins. Darkness's orders for his beasts were simple. Kill every living creature on every single continent. Just as a whole army of juiced-up beasts was about to spread out, they were interrupted by a golden beam of light coming from above. They looked up to the sky and saw the source of the destructive, glistening light. A dimensional crack with freaky roots emerging. The Australian beast force was just attacked by a black hole in the sky. Once the light beam died down, a lone dark rift was left up above them. That one rift quickly multiplied into dozens more. As Godfrey's roots broke through the fabric of reality, the frontrunners of the Australian force were assaulted by said roots. Darkness himself was alarmed. Then the lunatic started laughing manically, seemingly admiring the enemy's boldness in ambushing them on their home turf. Peeking through the black hole was Yu Yu, his golden leaves and core, the only source of light in the void. It looks like Darkness does not have to wait too long to have a face-to-face with his rival, Yu Yu, who has arrived. He could not have made a flashier entrance. His heavy roots immediately took control of the field, crushing the puny beasts that dared to overstep their bounds. His whole body sprawled throughout the entirety of the canyon. Kangaroo wondered if the madman was really planning on facing them up front in such an audacious manner. Yuji was confident in doing so because of the strength of his 9-wood arboreal roots. These roots could collapse the entire canyon that the beasts were trying to use as their jumping pad to spread destruction. Once the footing was secured, he swiftly went on the offensive and grabbed every beast he could, smothering them until they bled, their bodies crushed. Kangaroo was one of the few strong enough to resist and fast enough to dodge as for the final boss. Darkness was surrounded by the 9-wood arboreal roots at every angle, making him struggle from the get-go. Before they could respond properly, Godfrey had already made a proper landing, his leaves painting the field gold. They had never seen something like this before. In an instant, Godfrey changed the entire topography of the landmass to suit him. Then came the dimensions. On one side, a green portal opened out of nowhere, brimming with vitality and life. Kangaroo couldn't quite put his finger on the sensation it gave him, but wasn't good. Through the green light stepped out a golden insect foot. The first ones to arrive were Sparky and his mutant and army. He's leading the insect faction into this full-blown war. Next up was someone with fiery tails. Multiple of them. It was 9 tails. Little Panda, White Tiger, Chiriranoting, and the Arctic Bear. All of them heavy hitters hungry for blood. Then came Chingung, the elemental general, Lone Fun the Shadow, and the thousands of mutant rats he carefully cultivated to become killing machines. Kangaroo reckoned that this looked a lot like Misty Mountains. Full force, the first step directly into enemy lines, did not impress Chingung at all. But he had to admit that the evil spirit power emitting from these beasts was intense, even more so for the inner circle of darkness. Lun Fun maintained his composure, while warning his wary little sister to not be careless. In Kangaroo's perspective, evil spirit power is the thing that comes out of a human's mouth. He warned the Misty Mountain force that working with humans is whack. 9 Tails clapped back, telling Kangaroo that sowing dissension is the only thing he's good for. He admitted that it's one of his skills, but that's beside the point. Misty Mountain has a much bigger problem at hand. And they even win against the full force of monsters, handpicked among the deadliest beasts of Australia. If you look at the complete force of the Misty Mountains from left to right, you could say that they have the advantage. Based on pure aura alone, their lineup is insane. If you think about it, this is some Avengers Endgame type shit right here. Then there was the meeting of the bosses, Yuzu in his demi-combat form and Darkness. Still crazy as he is, Godfrey opened the fight by changing the topography and making an earth prison to trap Darkness away from the rest of his troops. He's well aware that this temporary prison would not hold up for long against someone like Darkness. This is a fight where everyone is putting their lives on the line. Darkness warned Yu of the consequences if he died, as the system should have told him already. God Tree was surprised to hear that. Darkness already knew the possibility of wiping out spirit power from the world. It looked like the final boss knew far more than he imagined. Darkness just laughed at the absurdity of it all. God Tree and his troops are trying to fight him with the knowledge that no matter who comes out on top, the ending of the story will remain the same. Meanwhile, the battlefield outside the Earth prison was just as intense as the inside. Both parties charge at one another with reckless abandon, both sides hungry for blood. One moment you could hear the avalanche of footsteps. The next you'd see every color on the spectrum, as explosions from different techniques painted the sky with all kinds of elemental attacks. In the sea, human forces were still trying their hardest to push towards Australia, on time at the vanguard. They just needed another tendon to enter the territorial waters of the continent. And the captain ordered the activation of spirit power. Somewhere he has 20 years of experience in the military, and he never could have expected that the day would come when humanity's survival hinges on a single mission. Who would have thought that you get to stand on the battlefront on the same side as all the major countries in the world? As soon as they entered the territorial waters of Australia, the waves became a lot wilder. It had only been a few seconds, and a strong sense of oppression was already gripping everyone's hearts. Just how many beasts are waiting for their arrival? Meanwhile, Big Panda had already arrived at the shore, after swimming all the way to the land. The colorful explosions from the clash of different elements continued non-stop. Big Panda had walked his way out of the coast and into the battlefield. He was just bitter that the war started without waiting for him. Baldhead the electric honey badger was going sicko mode against similarly leveled beasts. From the rear came a pair of giant lizard monsters, warring their way through the field, with multiple battle raid beasts as Vanguard Demon Cow served as a shot caller and informed his team of the incoming threats. Lion Tails made the final call to let their counter weapons out against the pair of giant lizards. Misty Mountain unleashed 2 icy trees as a response. 2 ice beasts from the deepest depths of the northern Arctic region roared their way to the front lines. The lizards did not even have a chance to fight. One was bitten on the neck, and the other was wrestled into the rocky ground. From the sky's misty mountains, Thunder Dragon quickly took out droves of enemies. With his overpowering control over thunder, spitting it out to the ground and cooking vicious beasts by the dozens. An electrifying dome of explosion disturbed the battlefield, a scale of advantage, dipping to the side of Misty Mountain. Kangaroo could see that, and it made him angry and frustrated. This dude was supposed to be the king's one, but he got wounded by the ape team's sneak attack. To stop any fraud allegations, Kangaroo shoved his hands into the ape's mouth and swiftly tore the poor guy's body in half. Through sheer strength, he dared the other apes to come at him and threatened to do the same thing to all of them. The display of power and the threats definitely made them flinch and fear for their lives. Then a freaking fireball came from above to stop Kangaroo from running his mouth again. The flames that consumed his entire body seemed endless as they spewed with unprecedented force. Kangaroo managed to tank the whole attack with his arms, but he was severely burned. Who else could have done this, other than our favorite fox, Lion Tails? From the very start, she already had her eyes set on the arrogant Kangaroo. They are going one-on-one. The Arctic bears went up against the Australian bears in an evenly matched contest of strength. Tiger Eno Titan made it clear why he has the title of the Tyrant, through a bloody display of ferocity. The mutant ants were having a hard time making an impact on the battlefield though, as they were getting picked off by the tongues of an anteater beast. Once they were caught, they went straight for the horrifying monster's strong jaws. One bite, one kill, as the anteater had an all-you-can-eat buffet. In the middle of the war, he could have done this for hours and hours without any problems, but Misty Mountain had a response for everything. A golden light bearing immutable weight crashed against the anteater, messing up its insides. Inside the golden light was Sparky. He thinks that an anteater is a creature that should not exist in this world any longer. The white anteater responded by threatening to kill every ant in the field and tear them apart limb from limb. Back in the middle of the battlefield, Thunder Dragon opened his maw to launch a sonic attack. The Dark Blade Glacier and White Dragon, titans of the Ice faction, used that opportunity to charge in. Up above, some human and fighter jets also joined the war. The first pilot that arrived looked below and saw the field lit up with a variety of colorful lights as 2 beast factions slaughtered each other. Their estimated number is in the tens of thousands. More importantly, the Mute, Tree, and Darkness are also engaged in one-on-one combat. The war has already started, and the human forces are still too far. Rapalot can't even survey the field without being interrupted by a bat beast flying directly in his path. By the time he noticed the beast standing in his way, it was too late, and the explosion of the aircraft lit up the sky. There was an eye-catching display of tragedy, but there are more worrying things to look down on. In the war zone, a freaking, full-grown dragon has entered the fray, on Australia's side judging by or alone. You could see that this big guy could change the tide of battle. When he opened his mouth to unleash a red death ray, Shingon and the rest hurriedly scrambled away, in a desperate attempt to save themselves. This red death ray eventually made its way into the earth prison that God Tree made for some private time with darkness. What do you mean by that? Thankfully, the queen spider was brave enough to stand up and spit out formic acid, accurately hitting the dragon's eyes and stopping the relentless attack. Next came the white agate, landing an elbow hit on the dragon's jaw. Chaining off those attacks was the demonic boar, with a wild boar charge to the side. To finish the job, the mantis queen unleashed a slice of her death sickle, straight into the legendary beast's throat. With the combined effort of the kings and queens of their respective factions, the mythical beast was brought down to the ground by force, even with a successful womb combo. The monarchs did not let their guard down. They couldn't afford to get complacent against an opponent this powerful, and they were right to do so. They pulled their strengths and timed their attacks right. But the Australian dragon still stood up with no problems. While the war was raging on, a certain someone was trapped in his own head. He was in the middle of a barren land. Inarable soil with dead trees fell in the ground. Everywhere he turned, his head was filled with death. Why has everyone disappeared? He asked with no hope of reply. It was so lonely and lonesome, not a speck of life and sight aside from him. As the rain started pouring down from the bleak skies, he wished he could have someone to play with. He just wanted someone he could talk to. With his tentacled form, he traveled the land tirelessly, until he saw some smoke rising from a settlement. He finally discovered humans. Just seeing another form of life gave him hope. He loved it. The humans tilling the land, working tirelessly, and going about their day fascinated him, but when he made himself known to them, their inherent reaction was fear and disgust. This would be appropriate, as darkness is an endlessly hungry being, hungry for death and decay. Humans are merely things to consume. For him, his bloody roars contain the unmitigated hunger and greed for flesh. One eternity later, back to the present. Darkness extended his tendrils forward and grabbed Yuji. He used demi-combat form, just like how he grabbed those humans to consume, but against the actual body of the God Tree. This type of straightforward attack was practically useless. Darkness continued to go on the offensive by spitting out his nasty sulfuric acid. The putrid slime came out of his every pore. It looked and probably smelled foul. Yu just stood there, waiting for the putrid gel to reach the optimal distance. When he estimated that it was in the perfect spot, the counter-attack started with a wave of his vines. The air suddenly turned frigid and pushed the sulfuric acid back to where it came from. It also froze the ooze in place, rendering it useless. After neutralizing the enemy's attack, God Tree let out a guttural roar as his roots and body shifted and transformed. Using his absolute evolution ability, he entered his wolf form. Without wasting another second, he pounced on darkness and started going to town. With his sharp fangs, he bit deep into that disgusting flesh and tore it apart with unprecedented force. But instead of heavily wounding the bastard, it seemed like he only angered the beast. The tendrils that darkness had been using as a weapon for binding turned into faint beasts that could cause some serious damage. Those tendril monsters pounced to Josie's wolf form, in return a fang for a fang. But with his improved control of absolute evolution, he was able to change into eternal form with absolute defense. Seeing that puncturing attacks would be useless, Darkness held Yu in place, and then started coalescing spirit power for a defray. He unleashed that destructive beam of energy against Yu's turtle form at a brutal range. Every beast from Misty Mountain felt that something wasn't right inside that earth prison. They were connected with the God Tree in a profound way, with the essence of life after all. Fortunately, the turtle form's defense was capable of tanking a death ray. Darkness even praised him for his super body control. He attributed this adaptability to Yu's life as a former human. Well, he's been living as a tree for 5 years, and he's picked up a lot of tricks along the way. Darkness didn't like the fact that Yu thought 5 years was a long time, when he himself had been trapped in the abyss for an entire epoch. So when it comes to control over one's abilities, he has superior experience. If he was so proud of the past a buck he spent honing his skills, then usually he would gladly take this challenge seriously. He took his demi-combat form back to the main body, swallowing a whole and activating 100 of his power. As soon as all this strength returned to one vessel, a qualitative and physical change started occurring. With his combat form, that resembled a mythical beast in play. He planned to send darkness back to where he was sealed, for another epoch outside the Earth prison. The war between two beast factions was still raging on. The Australian dragon was having his revenge on the monarch beasts, for skill and strength. While distracting the white ape with a dragon's breath, his tail had already extended to choke out the primate beast. He then proceeded to slam the poor guy on the ground, mercilessly behind the white ape, were the other defeated monarchs that have fallen from the might of the legendary monster. The Spider Queen might be down for the count with her injuries, but she still had the ferocity. She jumped out after fainting unconsciousness, surprising the dragon, but this sneak attack proved to be ineffective, as it only got her a massive hole in the middle of her body. After being pierced by the dragon's claw, she was discarded bloodily. The other monarchs were frozen in place. That could be them, if they dare to move again with their injuries. But even if they tried, they might not get the chance to do so. A bigger dragon's breath was already heading their way, threatening to burn them to a crisp in one final shot. But before landing on the monarchs, the attack was deflected away to a different direction. The Australian dragon was blissfully unaware that his attack had been parried away. Up front was a beast that bore a striking resemblance to him. Misty Mountain's Thunder Dragon had made a clutch move and defended the injured monarchs. Even the kings and queens were surprised to see Thunder Dragon pulling up to their fight. Thunder Dragon politely apologized to his fellow monarchs, as he requested to fight against the Australian dragon. His grown-ass flying lizard bone was his father. After all, imagine having beef with your dad, to the point of fighting to the death. Not far from this side of the field, Turnip Titan was about to face a centipede beast with human hands for legs. White Tiger was having a screaming match with a reptilian monster. White Dragon was about to tussle with what looked like a flaming platypus. Upon closer inspection, you could see that this goofy fire beast looked a little bit like Sadak. White Dragon was the type of fighter that thrived in intelligent fights, but it's hard to read the thoughts of someone without one. Firing off the freezing ray was the safest move to pull. Surprisingly, the platypus just stood there and did not even bother dodging the ice, or it might have been too slow to do so. It tamed the hit and paid for it, with some heavy wounds and a bleeding nose. Did not freeze though before composing itself. The platypus was already being knocked away by White Dragon's tail swipe. It knocked the flaming platypus face first into the ground. The White Dragon charged in, either to finish the enemy off to jump to a different battle. But that might not be too easy, as Mr. Platypus over here was getting really angry with all the being. The little guy opened his mouth to spew his lot of breath, the temperature around him increasing exponentially. But the result was a lackluster dribble of a paltry amount of lava, throwing a few centimeters to the ground. White Snake's freezing ray, on the other hand, was full of power and intense frigid energy. It was practically overkill, but it got the job done, encasing the little flaming platypus in sharp ice shards. Looking at the ice shards, that froze off a decent chunk of the battlefield. This should be an easy win for the books, but the flaming platypus was about to prove that celebrating a little too early is a grave sin. A warm energy started gathering around his little body, slowly melting the sharp ice formation away. White Snake could feel the air getting hotter by the second, as the flaming platypus broke out of the encasement, seemingly like a different angry beast. He's not only melt through the ice, but he also busted out of that cold prison. With a nuclear explosion, that explosion released a ton of lava into the nearby surroundings, alarming friends and foes alike. Seeing that this lava storm could kill a lot of their forces, King Gum hurriedly pushed his earth element manipulation to the limit. Using the strongest earth dome he could muster, they tried to tide through the lava storm coming in like a tsunami. Lung Fu and his sister arrived to try to save King Gum and the rest from being completely engulfed by lava. Inside the dome, he was starting to get extremely worried about little White Snake's battle in the front. That little snake might be a dragon now, but this lava attack was something else. Fortunately, White Dragon managed to put up a defensive technique on time. An ice sphere effectively shielded her from damage. Half of her body was burnt by the lava. It could have been worse had she not put up a defensive sphere on time. The flaming platypus proved that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Jumping onto another bough, the Tempest Wolves were struggling against the claws of their mismatched enemy. It was a hairy fellow standing on two legs with some sharp claws and an even sharper gaze. A freaking Australian werewolf. The answer to those claws lay in the golden blade of Misty Mountain's most badass fighter. Sparky had entered the fray to save the Tempest Wolves from being slaughtered for free. He might be an adept fighter, capable of slashing the strongest metals cleanly, but his blade could not make a dent against the werewolf's blocking arm. Sparky also sensed a strong spirit power being emitted from that hairy body. Something unnatural instead of yapping. This beast just roared like a mindless monster. Sparky gave it another try, this time using his bare hands under the effect of triple amplification. With his sheer strength multiplied thrice, the impact the strike made was devastating. But as the dust settled, we saw that the werewolf was unharmed, and a little more pissed off. He intended to respond with a claw attack of his own. Fist versus fist, this was the fight of real men, duking it out with just sheer force. The size might not have been a match, but Sparky could still push himself for a quadruple amplification. This time, his punch looked like it landed in the wolf's mouth. It was so fast and heavy that being hit with felt like taking an artillery round at point-blank range. Surprisingly, the wolf still had the presence of mind to shift his angle a little bit to dodge by a thin margin. Sparky was left wide open and paid for it. The wolf smacked him across the face. Being the absolute beast that he was, it did not even face Sparky. With a quadruple boost, he landed an uppercut to the wolf's jaw, opening up the dog's defenses. The golden ant went crazy with a barrage of punches. With his strength boosted, the werewolf roared in pain as internal and external injuries started piling up. Then as the final act, Sparky dug deep and went even higher. The absolute Dagger Jab went up to a quintuple amplification. In response to Sparky's quintuple strike, the werewolf activated his boundless physique. You could say it was an unstoppable force going up against an immovable object. Their clash resulted in the destruction of the rocky canyon. In the end, the wolf threw up his guts and blood in agony. While he was uncontrollably coughing, the golden ant menacingly got closer, looking like the Grim Reaper. As a last-ditch effort to at least cause some damage before being finished off, the werewolf entered berserk mode. Berserk definitely brought the monster's power level to another level, but it made him a little out of control. Sparky had to acknowledge that this big dog was a formidable foe. Jumping to another fight, we see a three-eyed creature going absolutely bonkers, with its tendrils slapping everything in sight. Little Panda brought out his again, with the Crimson Lotus solar flare, summoning what looked like a miniature sun to the battlefield. He launched it directly at the Austral's body, bypassing all the winding tendrils easily. The force behind that miniature sun was so powerful that it managed to pierce through the monster's body, burning a hole through it. As for the small-time Australian beasts, they were using superior numbers to attack en masse. Thankfully, Misty Mountain had some heady hitters who excelled in cleaving tons of enemies in one go. Chief among them was Demon Cow with his battle axe imbued with the oppressive power of gravity. Up in the skies, the Purgrying Falcon faction was also showing that they're not just messengers, but also a destructive force. With their bullet dives, they moved in the air so fast that they could pierce through beast skulls, one after another, without losing momentum. Even the vultures that rarely get screen time were providing cover fire with their meteor shower wings. From up in the air, they rained down free hits on the poor Australian beasts. Pteranodon must have grown tired of trampling down enemies physically, so he decided to switch to ranged attacks. You can make the argument that this method was even more efficient in erasing tons of cannon fodder enemies. Shingen linked up with the Ape faction to brawl, with a diverse lineup of enemies on the front lines. Thorn and the Snake Girl teamed up, the latter turning enemies to stone, and the former shattering them with her Crimson Vine. The only path to victory was to concentrate their powers in hopes of overcoming the major deficit in numbers. The rescued kid from a few chapters ago had grown up to be a brilliant strategist, leading White Tiger and the rest of the Tiger tribe to mug on foes, of course. Our beloved trio of Baldhead, Bold Silk Monkey, and Demon Boar stuck with each other to beat some scrubs to death. The freaky two-faced spider was just glad that he could finally start a massacre. Maintails and Kangaroo were in a world of their own. The No. 1 generals of both factions duking it out. Kangaroo was certain that they'd eventually get the dub, given their superior numbers, but the Fiery Fox begged to differ. They might be at a disadvantage with a number of beasts alone, but Misty Mountains aren't the only ones opposing darkness from above. Nuclear warheads were deployed at breakneck speeds, homing in on the side of Australia's force. It was a controlled explosion that blatantly targeted those affiliated with darkness. Irontails was correct in saying that the numbers didn't matter. Darkness had made an enemy out of the entire globe. Huaxia Federation was the vanguard of the human forces at sea. Their massive aircraft carriers and warships paved the way. The captain ordered a continued barrage of everything they had on deck to destroy Australia's beasts while avoiding the forces of Misty Mountain. There might be a little bit of a problem though. A few gargantuan presences surfaced from the depths. Tentacles of a sea monster disrupted the advancement of multiple ships by string up destroying them. The aquatic beasts that darkness brought in to collaborate with Australia's land monsters had finally made their move. Of course, this included the new 7 kings of the seas. 10 nations alliance were shoved into a tough position as the deep sea kings surfaced on their side of the formation to prevent them from advancing further. With just one casual swing of a tentacle, a warship was split into 2, killing the crew. The ships in the vicinity started firing every firearm and explosive they had ready in an attempt to drive the deep sea kings away. But their pathetic bullets were not even powerful enough to make a chip on any of the monster's scales. Some attack helicopters tried their hand at neutralizing the enemies with missiles. Thankfully, their specialized load was enough to make a lot of these slimy freaks scream out. The octopus deep sea king must have had enough of being humiliated by humans, so he prepared a destructive beam to thin the humans down a little bit. He blatantly targeted the major ships that carried most of the armaments. On the other hand, Hua country's battleships experienced the same explosive problems. Their ships on the right side were going down one by one, losing communication bit by bit. To make matters worse, some sea beasts had climbed up their prized ship, the destroyer, on this side. The Crab King was leading the charge, and he looked immensely pissed off. The oversized crab bashed his pincer against one of the battleships and damn near tipped it over. It would have been over if not for a golden apparition interrupting the next bash. The spiritual challenger, who had once gone up against the Crab King, was finally getting his rematch against the beast. He wouldn't let the seafood escape this time around. He summoned the entirety of his spiritual golden apparition, fully intent on decimating the crab. The giant golden Jesus apparition stood before the crab king of the deep seas. I'm pretty sure this sentence has never been uttered in human history. Where challenger would not let the 7 sea kings retreat back to their salty hideaways, this time around back on the octopus king's side. The poor, tentacle bastard was facing multiple nuclear bombs, bringing imminent destruction. Once the first batch of explosives effectively detonated, new ones rose up. Yule, the master of magnetism, was controlling his country's entire nuclear arsenal. With his powers, he'd come to terms with the fact that humans might be insignificant, but they wouldn't sit and wait for death. Even transcendent Johnny Sins was echoing the same sentiment while brawling with the bastards from the seas. The ruthless bishop flew among the aquatic beasts and delivered some holy retribution. With a menacing smile, he attributed the slaughter to the name of God. He vowed to eliminate everything that is evil. Heavy armored knight brought their all in honor of their swords, which would never yield. Man-made explosions from either technology or spirit power lit up the coast from a distance. Darkness felt that his 70 kings had started intercepting and fighting the humans in the water. Knowing this bastard, he would not let the chance to talk trash about the humans being on the back foot. This was not good news for Yuzu at all. He needed those human forces to sap up and contribute, no matter what, without warning. Darkness suddenly unleashed multiple beams of sickly light from his body. Yuzu's demi-combat form was torn to shreds against the concentrated beams. Even so, it did not cause too much damage, leading Darkness to ask just how many forms he had. To answer that rhetorical question, Daedri summoned a seemingly infinite number of golden wisps in the air, unsure of what was going on. Darkness fell for the attack, succumbing to the infinite explosions of the wisps. To continue the barrage of explosions, Yuji opened one of his dimensions, where endless amounts of these explosive wisps have been gathered. The rain that pelted the villain's physical body was too much to bear. He had to use his tendrils in a desperate attempt to alleviate the pain. This left him open for God Tree's other attacks, using his root zoom in and cutting the air with its sharpness. Sharpness was trapped in perilous position. Ironwood arboreal roots gave life to his every root, resembling hungry beasts frantic to bite into the body of Darkness. The combination of physical and explosive attacks completely overwhelmed the opposition. Yuzui was not done yet with his vines. He summoned every attribute he had an affinity with, which was almost every element out there, for a brilliant elemental offshoot. Multiple attributes, specializing in different kinds of damage, assaulted the final boss's senses. To add some icing on the cake, Yuji used Thunder Control, one of his most tried and tested attacks. It beckons some divine thunder to descend from the skies, Coalescing above the earth dome, the one-eyed freak was way too overwhelmed by the barrage of elemental attacks to even put up a defensive stop. When the divine thunder came to strike him down, the sheer destructiveness of the element slowly tore his body apart. Piece by piece, ominous screams of agony filled the air as darkness was consumed by the electrifying lights. Yuji was not taking any chances of a comeback now that he was clearly ahead with the snap of a finger. He wanted more darkness, was completely paralyzed, tanking the hits with just his body. Then came the second thunder that took on a draconic form. It was like the divine thunder had a life of its own. You can even hear its overwhelming roar as it descended to the ground. Purple lights engulfed the entire field. Darkness was absolutely cooked by this point. Being under so much pain and coming closer and closer to defeat reminded him of a child calling his pitch-black form disgusting. For some reason he was in so much pain. And here he was, reminiscing about something from the distant past. Yuji was confident that his combo of attacks would be enough to send this monster to where he belonged. Through the burn and agony of being engulfed by divine thunder, darkness asserted that this world was where he should be. With all his might, that scream must have awakened something within his dark heart that affected the field. Darkness successfully lived through the tribulation of thunder, even though his body was torn up beyond recognition. Tired of being trapped inside God Tree's home court, he extended his dark energy to all angles, shattering the earth down to pieces. Now that they were back in the open air, the light of the night sky gave everyone a gruesome view of what remained of Darkness's body. Yuji must have expected that this ancient entity would still survive, but at least he was certain that Darkness was taking damage. The final boss took a moment to praise God Tree's outstanding pace of growth. Well, with the embodiment of death and darkness as his opponent, he didn't really have any other choice than to push himself to the limits. As a reward for his perseverance and determination, Darkness wanted to give him a reward. He wanted to share a little personal secret. He confessed that he too possessed evolution points. They were more alike than any other two beings on the planet. Darkness scoffed and opened his dark system panel. He had this system panel under control, to the point of being able to show it to others besides himself. With just a single thought, the system asked him if he wanted to spend 10,000 evolution points to purchase the regeneration ability. Darkness's sick and twisted mouth curled into a sly grin as he answered yes. Yuji was shaken to the core. What the hell did the dark system panel mean? Well, as more essence of darkness coalesced into the final boss's body, the dark system's capabilities were displayed at full capacity. Ditching the one-eyed form, Darkness turned into a gigantic humanoid beast with eyes for days from now on. They would be competing to see who would run out of spirit power first. This bastard had 130 million evolution points saved up. Darkness finally revealed his humanoid form in all its glory. With his new form came the mood swings. He strongly asserted that he was the original offspring of this world, and he was more qualified than anyone to exist. God Tree ditched his demi-combat form and returned to his full combat form. With all the roots and tendrils in a bipedal body, the two actually looked alike. Sensing the urgency that comes with facing an opponent with infinite ways to mess him up, Yusuke chose to use one of his most costly abilities. Instantaneous to stop time for a few seconds. He knew we needed to finish Darkness off as soon as possible, or the consequences would be catastrophic. While time was stopped, he was supposed to assault Darkness with 9 wood arboreal roots, but he was interrupted by a green beam. The beam shattered his jaw, wiping out half of his face. This was not supposed to happen. Darkness knew the question swirling inside God Tree's mind. Time was supposed to be on pause, so why was this bastard still moving? It was just surprises one after the other at this point. Well, the answer was simple. Darkness used his system to purchase the Nullify skill at the cost of 500,000 evolution points. On top of that, he purchased an ability called Imitation. That green beam for earlier was a copy of 9 wood arboreal roots. He was using God Tree's signature move against the God Tree himself. I don't like where this is going. To make matters worse, it looked like his version was a lot more powerful and polished as well. As his rigid limbs crumbled to pieces, Yuji was at a loss for words. Thankfully, Yuji, he left a little something on the ground. Darkness was standing on a little booby trap. Was set to unleash an upward explosion of golden lights that brought unbearable pain. Yusuke quickly regenerated his missing limbs and seized control of the battle's pace. Darkness's humanoid form was severely damaged, as that trap was a light elemental skill. Other than the clear element, God Tree should be able to control every other attribute. While they couldn't quite grasp the water element just yet hither, As for the dark element, he could just kill darkness, and naturally possess the highest affinity for it. Darkness actually felt a little jealous that God Tree could possess abilities, as he could only purchase one time use abilities using evolution points. But the bright side was that he had access to an endless library of abilities and innate talents within reach. With a single thought, Darkness wanted to explain his ability in full, and he knew of a way to give UC a sense of his capabilities in full effect. Before Guthrie could make another move, the two of them were suddenly trapped in a synthetic prison. This too came from Darkness's endless number of abilities available through the purchaser system. The way he gained evolution points was different too. He didn't have to go around killing to obtain them. He could just use subordinates to do the dirty work. That's precisely why he sent the Australians all over the globe to kill as many humans as possible. In a place like a war zone where creatures would fight to their deaths, creatures that die would automatically become his evolution points. He could say that his evolution points were infinite. He was a creature that thrived in death. After explaining his overpowered system, Darkness purchased a lava physique for 300,000 evolution points. Using his magma tendrils, he launched another attack. Yuzuk took up a defensive stance and reinforced his body with crystallization. The magma tendrils made a direct hit, but Gautrie's defense held up. He roared out of the dust clouds and counterattacked. He called in a gigantic avalanche to freeze everything it touched. With the Ice Age, Darkness answered with Dark Blade, a psionic attack typically used by dragons. It was the perfect counter to shatter the Ice Age into a million little crystalline pieces. Then he purchased another skill for a measly 30,000 evolution points. Can you guess what that would get him? Freaking gravity manipulation. Demon Cow's ace in the hole. With gravity weighing God Tree down, dodging the next attack would be next to impossible. So Darkness spent a crisp 50,000 evolution points and pointed to the heavens above. He called out the divine tribulation that tore his previous body apart and hammered down the thunder control against God Tree. It consumed God Tree's body. As Darkness watched intently, once the smoke had settled, Yuzui was revealed to have withstood the barrage of elemental attacks in one piece thanks to crystallization. Darkness was in a chatty mood right now. He wanted to confess why he wanted humans to fight against the God Tree. It wasn't because he was afraid of humans, as you initially thought. Darkness just wanted to play with them because he detested every single human. He wanted to toy with them and watch them fall into the abyss. In the middle of an intense fight, this fool sat down and asked if God Tree had ever experienced despair. He was just asking because he intended to make Yu experience the pits of despair like never before. The story of Darkness began way back, at the end of the Cretaceous period, 65 million years ago, that's right. He came from a meteorite that landed on the planet when dinosaurs still roamed the earth. His arrival on land caused quite a stir. He was trapped inside a massive rock at that time, and that rock made an extremely powerful impact. It was so powerful that it triggered the extinction event that killed dinosaurs. Damn, Darkest was just a tiny, discolored debris at this point in time, just another piece of sediment. Inside that dark-colored rock, a shadowy figure slipped away. Before vanishing, the figure prayed for him to live on no matter what. It was his mother. He arrived on the planet with his mom, but she did not get to stick around for unknown reasons. Before disappearing, she felt assured that on this planet, her son would definitely find someone to rely on. And so, Darkness remained dormant on this piece of dark rock. It didn't matter if it rained so hard that the planet's water level rose. It didn't matter when the Ice Age arrived and covered everything in unbearable cold. It didn't matter when the explosion of life happened and plants conquered the planet with their numbers. No matter what red it was, the rock stood solid and sturdy. That was until an ordinary tree grew around it, for years, seemingly hugging the dark rock in a warm embrace. Once inside the growing tree, the dark rock opened akin to an egg hatching. He slowly shed the nature-worn exterior, with the help of the tree's embrace. Inside was Darkness, unaware of his purpose, his origin, his past, and his future. He stumbled out of the tree and came upon humans for the first time. It was the little girl from his vision before. She didn't fear him for his bizarre appearance. She was just curious about the weird animal she stumbled upon. This was Darkness's introduction to the world, his first encounter with another being. The little girl decided to raise him and name him Blackie. It didn't take long for them to grow close as two beings could be. She taught him how to live and how to feel joy. She was clumsy, always getting into trouble for the sake of fun or survival. He might always have to step up so she didn't get harmed. They lived in the woods for quite some time, and they lived well. Blackie even learned how to cook fish perfectly. But no matter how hard he tried, his little ball body just rejected the taste of anything he tried. Consuming winter came, and they accidentally barged into a bear's territory. By this time Blackie was adept enough in combat that an average bear wouldn't stand a chance. He might have been a formidable force in these woods, but the young lady still insisted on doing stuff herself. One thing she liked doing with his help was flying in the air. Blackie would take her to the edge of the woods and help her traverse the lands up above at night. She would rest peacefully while he kept his eyes open. Both of them had never felt more secure. In their short lives, this routine went on for 2 years, until one fated day on the cliff they used to practice flying in. By this time, Blackie had learned how to speak the human tongue, and the young lady had become disillusioned and abusive, demanding Blackie change and grow stronger. For some reason, she didn't like looking at her friend anymore, as he reminded her of the first time they met. In her village, they sent 2 people to the palace to be palace maids every 2 years. Those chosen would enter the lowest caste in society and take on endless degrading tasks. She was afraid of such a life and would do anything to avoid being chosen. So for the past 2 years, she stole, toiled, and saved a bit of silver to bribe the palace eunuch, in hopes of being excluded from the list. In that case, little Blackie and the young lady would still be able to meet every day. The very next day, Blackie waited in the woods with utmost optimism. But his friend, Ling Ling, was taking a long time to return. Back in the village, Ling Ling humbly kneeled before the palace eunuch, offering her coins as a bribe. She can package it with a bright smile, thinking that her efforts would be enough to sway the decision. The eunuch smiled at the offering, the greed in his eyes evident. He took the coin bag and weighed it in his hand. Sensing how light it was, the eunuch threw Ling Ling's savings right back at her. The bastard was offended to receive a miserable bag of a few lousy bronze coins, when he was expecting a bag full of silver. He asserted that having someone like Ling Ling in the palace would only spoil the atmosphere, so he decided to execute her right there and then, to serve as a warning to others who might have the same pathetic idea. As soon as the soldiers drew their blades, Ling Ling made a run for it. She reached the entrance to the woods before the soldier caught up, slicing down with all his might. Blackie was too far to intervene. Ling Ling was brutally struck down by the orders of a corrupt palace official. The other villagers immediately distanced themselves from Ling Ling for fear of being implicated. Even the eunuch could see that they were just saving their own skin. He ordered the soldier to cut Ling Ling's head off. For the palace report, just as the blade was about to separate her head from her body, she weakly called for her friend, with darkness making it before the blade landed. The one that was beheaded was the soldier. The eunuch and the villagers couldn't comprehend what they were looking at, but it struck fear in their hearts. This was the day that little Blackie embraced the darkness, the day of his first kill. The anger and adrenaline of taking a human life must have unlocked his capabilities. In fear and confusion, the eunuch ordered the remaining soldier to kill the creature. The poor soldier didn't even get the chance to move when darkness swallowed his head whole. With the armed forces taken care of, the palace official was left alone, defenseless. Afraid of getting their heads lopped off, the villagers ran away as fast as they could. At this point, darkness was so full of rage that he would not let anyone escape. His body extended in every angle, strangling and stabbing the villagers at will. Try as they might, darkness was just too fast and too brutal. One shot, one kill. The body count continued to rise as darkness fell deeper and deeper into depravity. Cries of agony filled the air. The palace official started begging for his life. He was so afraid that he even peed his pants. The fool swore to give darkness whatever he wanted, as long as he got spared. That wasn't going to cut it at all. Darkness paid special attention to this scumbag. The only thing he wanted out of this bastard was to die. Darkness used his malleable body to constrict the eunuch and tighten up until blood and gore were squeezed out. In just a few minutes, everyone who did his friend dirty joined Ling on the floor lifeless. For the first time in his life, Darkness felt his tears welling up. Now that he's taken revenge, he just wanted Ling to wake up. No matter how much he screamed and cried, she didn't move. Then the trees, grass, animals, and insects around the area started dying. It was at this moment that the Dark System panel made its first appearance. With the system activated, he would be able to use the ability Era Change to activate the spirit power source. He reckoned that using this thing would make it possible to bring Ling back to life upon activation. He saw a rundown of his profile. Aim Darkness. Race none. His innate talent converts dead creatures to evolution points, while Purchaser allows him to buy skills. He so desperately wanted to bring his friend back to life, so the system offered absolute recovery for 10,000 evolution points. With 15,000 in the bank, he was able to use absolute recovery on Ling Ling. Upon sensing the breath of life coming back to her body, Darkness jumped into her embrace. He thought he was going to be all alone again. He wouldn't be able to take that. Ling Ling pulled him into a hug and swore that she would never abandon him. Feeling the safety of her warmth lulled him into a false sense of security. Darkness got his little body torn up by a blade. Ling Ling had picked up the soldier's sword and stabbed it right into her friend. She saw the kind of cruelty Darkness was capable of. Ling Ling sealed her resolve to end Darkness before things got worse. But it was too late by that point. Are you serious right now, bro? Back to the present, that little ball of innocence had started the biggest war that humanity had ever faced. Behind the battleships of every significant international power, a big black ball of spikes emerged from the water. Yule and his transcendent soldiers were the first responders. A beast with a pitch-black body and a singular crimson eye. It was bigger than any of the 7 Sea Kings. There was no doubt about it. This was an offshoot of Darkness itself. This sea urchin-like Darkness form immediately started gearing up for a hyper beam. Yule hurriedly ordered his men to get the fleet out of the monster's attack range before it was too late. Well, by the time he finished giving out orders, it was too late. The hyper beam plowed through dozens of battleships in the fleet, clearing them out and their respective crews in one shot. Fire and smoke went up on the surface of the sea. It wasn't looking good for humans. Yule looked back to his precious force going up in flames, without being able to do anything about it. By the initial estimations, it looked like 10 of their total forces had been destroyed. This also made it harder to push forward, due to all the debris. The heavy armored knight, who was taking it easy on the ship in the middle of the pack, waiting to land on the beaches of Australia, was met with a sobering sight. Even more of these sea urchin, Darkness monsters emerged from the water, and were now spreading between fleets. The cruel bishop looked behind him. Even if he was a merciless killing machine, in the name of God, he was still part of the human team, in a precarious situation. These sea urchin monsters stood as tall as some of the aircraft carriers they had brought out. They armed the heaviest artillery weapons in Tau and aimed at the spiky balls of Darkness, in an attempt to blast them out of the way. Yule couldn't afford to let these pesky creatures destroy even more of their battleships. They hadn't even reached the mainland. Back in the real war zone, we finally witnessed the battle between father and son. Dragon to dragon, it looked like. Thunder Dragon had been pushed to the brink of defeat. In the few minutes that we weren't paying attention, his father was one tough cookie. He tried to communicate, but the Australian dragon only gave him low roars in response every time he tried to close the gap and deal some damage. The big bum would always respond with a brutal physical attack. This time, a backup appeared to spare Thunder Dragon from even more wounds. Zilong the Bug of the Void had interfered to test his strength against a mythical beast. He knew why Thunder Dragon was getting beat up. He asserted that if the young dragon continued to show mercy, death would be inevitable regardless of blood. It looked like the young dragon wasn't the only one getting reinforcement. A white rhino with hornet horns came on the scene, hungry for blood. The big bastard roared menacingly as it charged forward. Elsewhere, the mutant rats were effectively showing down. Some small and mid-sized monsters, they become efficient fighters. Compared to what they looked like in their first missions to dig an underground city and assassinate humans, they looked a lot more ferocious now. But they might have just walked into the biggest mismatch of the century. An even bigger rat had entered the fray to stop the mutant rats from picking off beasts so freely. Few knew who this was. This was Australia's giant Red King. It unleashed a terrifying squeak that made the whole battlefield tremble. Even Little Panda, fresh from another victory against an Austral, didn't like seeing a king-rank creature appearing and disrupting their pace. And worse news was coming. The Australiths that had survived the fight thus far were starting their evolution process. It looked like they figured out how to expedite turning into that horrific moth and transforming one by one. Little Panda thought he would just be dealing with that weird beam-like form, not the complete beasts, and it wasn't just one. All of the remaining Australites had reached their full potential in one go still. Little Panda was not one to back down when faced with seemingly impossible odds. He had Divine Flowered the Tiger tribe, and many more standing with him to face this challenge. Little Panda led the courageous charge, diving head first into battle. Did they even stand a chance against these bugs? It took Godfrey's full strength to take one down a few years ago, right back in the main boss battle. Yuzi was insulting Darkness for having such a corny trash talk game. Aside from that, Darkness revealed that while Godfrey was recruiting powerful subordinates, he was also making a lot of preparations. Back in the sea, Golden Jesus was tanking the Crab King's pincher attacks without issues, but the crab must have wised up and attacked the challenger controlling the apparition himself. The bishop also found himself teaming up with Golden Jesus, but the crab proved to be a much tougher opponent than they initially thought. He was grating his teeth and enduring the internal injuries. Without even being able to go on the offensive, the percentage of destroyed fleets continued to rise. The sea was slowly turning into a sea of fire. Yule tried his best to prevent any more damage. He even used the metallic debris from the sunken ships as his weapons, but these sea urchin-looking creatures were just too tough. They were able to take down a few, but it required an astronomical amount of effort. In the Freedom Federation's fleet, the casualty report was currently undetermined, but their entire second fleet in the middle had been sunk. Based on the current situation, it was unclear whether they could even hold on for another 10 minutes. This is what Darkness meant when saying that the most foolish thing one could do is to work with humans from the start. Darkness had drafted the 7 Sea Kings from different species on every continent. Whether it was quantity or quality, his army was miles above Godfrey's. The result of this battle was already set in stone. But you didn't see things like that. Humans might be weak, but they've always had the ability to shake things up with unexpected intelligence. This time, that might come in the form of a certain flame impress. To join her master's side. Darkness was wrong in thinking that humans were the only ones Godfrey enlisted. Now we'll see the power of genetic hybrids.